My name is Laura Shope. I'm the high school art teacher, and myself and Meddy Baldwin, who is the Next Steps counselor here at the school, have been working with this group of students for the last year on such a wide variety of projects. It's been really fun, and it's been really fun to watch them deepen their experience and to transform and grow and complete their projects over the last year. So just a couple housekeeping things. If you have a cell phone, please make sure it's silenced. And we will be recording these presentations, so you don't need to feel like you need to record your own students. We will have those and make those available, but do feel free to take a photo here and there. And because we have such a fantastically large class, we're doing this for 2 nights. We're not going to take an intermission tonight, so each student will speak for about 10 minutes, and at any point in between students, if you need to get up and take a break, feel free to do that, okay? All right, so class 2025, we've been working hard over the last year. Many, many hours. So we have a requirement that students spend at least 80 hours on their project. I think we have some that are in the hundreds or close to 1,000 hours on their project this year. So really a lot of time and effort. You know, I was in an art class recently and a student got some blood on their hands, and we were joking about how every good project takes a little blood, sweat, and tears. And I think we probably had that with this group here. So tonight and tomorrow night is a celebration of their efforts, their learnings, and their self-discoveries, and each of them is going to share their story with you. Thank you in advance for being an amazing, gracious audience. I don't think there are very many students in this group that have ever spoken to a crowd this large, so we appreciate your support in that process as they go. So, to begin tonight, I would like you to give a warm welcome to our first presenter.
All part of the process. Supposed to turn on, but I'll work on that.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Beau and I'm thrilled to share my senior project with you all. After considering multiple woodworking ideas beforehand, such as making cutting boards and wood-turning urns, I settled on making and restoring this vintage motorcycle right here. I've always had a mind for engineering, and this project couldn't have been a better choice for me. Especially when I met my neighbor and mentor, Scott, who just was walking down our alleyway, was talking to my dad, and both started talking about motorcycles. And my recent interest in motorcycles during that time, my mom suggested, why don't you do that for your senior project? Right then and there, that's what I was going to do. And as a bonus, it was continuing a project that my dad worked on years and years ago. My dad has always been very appreciative of Indian motorcycles, and his admiration for them definitely rubbed off on me. In 1901, Indian Motorcycles was founded and was famous for models like the Scout and Chief. However, in 1953, it did shut down due to financial issues and World War II requiring a lot from them. However, Polaris Industries acquired the brand in 2011, successfully modernizing their motorcycle, and in modern day, it is one of the most popular bikes to restore. The motorcycle I restored is a 1937 Indian Junior Scout. It's a smaller, more compact, and more affordable at the time version of the Scout model. About 7 years ago, my dad started working on this project. He did it for fun, but he just never had the chance to finish it. So this project wasn't just about restoring a motorcycle, it was also continuing something meaningful for my dad. When I first started going through everything, I found original and aftermarket parts. And a lot of the aftermarket parts were supplied by this small business in South Dakota named Jerry Gria Engineering, who does a bunch of different parts for the motorcycles, tries to his best to recreate it as he could. All the stuff I had for this motorcycle was in a storage shed shed down in Texas. It required a lot of back and forth trips, so it felt a lot like a home renovation project, where you just went to the hardware store, you forgot 2 things, needed to go back, forgot more things, needed to go back once more. After I got everything for the bike, I finally got to work on it. The engine, transmission, framework, most of large parts of the bike were completed years ago by my dad. But it was the small things, the fine details that required a lot of attention in the most amount of time. While working on this restoration, I realized this is pretty fun. I want to do more of it. And my dad also has other bikes that he has ready for me to help him with. Like any restoration project, there are many complications that came along the way. While transporting the bike back here, the headlight of the lens broke. It's not working again, unfortunately, but different story. And there were a lot of fitment issues. Some of the things just didn't align properly, wasn't working out, needed to do a bunch of things with that. Won't bore you with details. And then one of the interesting things was the electrical story. There was no up-to-date modern information of any electrical diagram for this specific bike. So I made my own. I also needed to make something for the brake light. At the time, there was nothing for the brake light for when you pressed on the pedal, the brake light would show up. That's very important if you're going to be driving it down a road. You want to let other people know. So I started assembling slowly and slowly. I used diagrams that felt a lot like a Lego project, and some of it was a lot easier to understand than an IKEA furniture piece. Then, after soldering everything together, fitting it onto the bike, it was time to place the battery and test everything out. That's when the moment of truth came. I started everything together, guessed along the way, tried my best, and to my surprise, we turned the key and the light came on. And as you can see, the first photo, just very loose. Second photo, I'm getting better. Last photo, the headlight's supposed to come on. Didn't there. Oh well. But when I did this, there were a couple other issues that I found which frustrated me a lot, which was the horn wasn't working, needed to fix that. A couple of the wires broke off, needed to fix that. The brake light circuit, needed to fix that. But I handled those one at a time. Once the mechanical and electrical work was finished, I focused on the details. I applied the decals, did the pinstriping, and made sure all the paint touch-ups of all the scratches I made looked good. So, after all that, I started to reflect of what I did. So when restoring something or working on a mechanical project, having personal or previous experience goes a long way. There are some times that feels like a Lego set building, but other times I had no clue what I was doing. So having my mentor or my dad help me because they have experience and knowledge made the solutions to problems much easier and much quicker to deal with. And when my intuition wasn't enough, learning from others was the best way for me to grow. There was another part where I lost a lot of motivation during this project. Roughly 3 months, I didn't even touch it. I would just look at it, go to school, come back, look at it, that was it. And I just didn't know what to do. I felt stuck. I needed to find a way to get back working on it. And I started watching YouTube videos of people going to junkyards and restoring other motorcycles. That got me more motivated. This consumption of content made me feel like I could do it again. So I went back to it. There are a lot of problems to deal with. But now that I came with a bit more knowledge and an intuition, I solved each problem one step at a time. Every time I solved one, 3 more would pop up. Now, this really tried my patience. It was very frustrating because I just wanted to get done as soon as possible. But I needed to learn and slow down with every problem and handle them one at a time. And that's also when I realized that I needed to set my goal and expectations lower. The original goal was to get this bike up and running. However, recently we found out the combustion pressure is not enough for it to run, so I couldn't get there. In the future, it will run. But I realized by setting smaller goals, such as just get this part done today, felt really big accomplishments, and it felt more rewarding as I slowly completed it more and more. If there's one thing I want to leave you all here with today, it's never stop learning. This project wasn't just a learning experience for me, it was also one for my dad and mentor. No matter how experienced you are, there's always something new to learn, whether it's engineering, mechanics, or whatever field you're working in. Seek knowledge through your interests. When you're passionate about something, learning doesn't feel like a chore. It's something fun, enjoyable, and you want to do more of it. I would like to thank my dad for his knowledge and his help with getting all the materials for this bike and sharing everything. My mentor, Scott, for just showing up one day and helping us out and inspiring me. Big shout out to my friend Jeremy, who lended me his toolbox, which I need to give back to you. He had a bunch of small tools that I needed, and they were perfect for the job. And a couple of Ace Hardware employees who held and dealt with my random request of trying to find a piece. So thank you for your time and seeing my project.
Good evening. My name is Nimah Aziam, and I am presenting on the mental health and cancer rates of firefighting. For a few years now, I've been incredibly passionate about not only helping those in immediate need, but also their stories. This interest worked as an outline in the beginning of my quest to find a senior project topic, and eventually as a foundation for what I landed on. I was initially really interested in working with refugees in any way that I could, but being a minor still and I was looking for these opportunities and not having any experience with that, I had to reorganize my thoughts and channel my ambitions elsewhere. For a minute there, I was fairly down in the dumps and concerned about what I was going to do. That is, until I remembered Kaylin's mom, Mandy, is a firefighter, someone whose job embodies the very values I care so deeply about. When I reached out to them, both Kaylin and Mandy were incredibly kind and receptive of me, honestly saving me at the last minute. So thank you both so much for that. Not long after, I was at the station with Mandy trying on gear and riding in a fire truck. My project initially aimed to get as much firefighter experience as possible, but since I don't have an EMT license and no prior experience, I quickly had to shift the frame of my project to something less action-packed, so I could avoid being a liability and focus a lot more on the internal experience of being a firefighter. When I spent more time with my mentor getting familiar with the equipment, her coworkers, and her, I started to develop a strong interest in specifically the cancer rates and mental health of the firefighters because that's what hits them the hardest. As I thought about it more, I realized how much I wanted to shed light on the sacrifices and the struggles that those who work to protect us go through every day as a result of their work. While I was with Mandy, I spent my time having conversations with her and her coworkers about not only their experiences with different calls, severe and mundane, but also running errands with them as I worked to upkeep the stations. One of the coolest actiony things I did was riding around in the fire truck, talking to them through the headset. I felt like I was doing something serious and official, even though we were just going to chop wood and make sure bears didn't get into the neighbor's shed again. We also looked at trucks. We spent a lot of time doing that. For me, though, my favorite part was actually just listening to what they all had to say. Even though it was hard to hear sometimes, I felt connected with them and honored by their vulnerability. It was a small station with not a lot to do, but I felt surrounded by leaders nonetheless. That's the point of this whole presentation in a way, that each station is full of strength and courage, regardless of the size. So is each firefighter. Mandy said she was small for a firefighter, but I think she was the bravest one there. One of the most important pieces of firefighting is the protective gear. As I'm sure we all know, the typical suit is made up of a helmet, a fire-resistant jacket, gloves, pants, boots, and a mask. Something they also carry around is a gear belt full of doohickeys and knickknacks that they fill over time. Almost like the more things in your gear belt, the more tough you are. The cherry on top of all of this is a nice and heavy oxygen tank that they need to breathe. I was lucky enough to try all of this on and mess around in it. As a firefighter, you're supposed to get the full suit on and be ready to go in less than a minute. It took me about 5 with some unprofessional hopping and laughing while Mandy took pictures. One thing about the gear that I didn't think about until it was too late was just how heavy it all is, especially on the untrained body. The average weight of a full setup is 45 to 75 pounds. Mine was a little over 50. I was struggling to move at my normal pace, let alone a jog or a sprint. That's why firefighters in training usually spend about 6 months working out and running through drills with full gear on before they're awarded their own. When they finally do get their own gear, it's a rite of passage, which makes sense. I know for me, I was immediately humbled when I almost fell out of the fire truck with the full gear on, even though I tried really hard to be nonchalant and mysterious. Throughout this project, I consistently showed up for myself, ready to do the work. When it was time to research, take notes, or just be present with the people around me, all of me was there. To be honest, it was basically just one lock-in session after the next some days. Even though I can be afraid and unsure of how well I'll be able to do something, this project taught me that I am more than capable of and willing to push through the chaos, despite the busy schedule all of us seniors have been subjected through against our will. In fact, I've fallen in love with the feeling of finally being finished with a big assignment or a bunch of work that I know I put my best effort into. I'll be able to take my first real deep breath in about 6 months when I walk off this stage and sit back down while the next poor soul has to walk up here. I know I'm having a blast. There are many consequences to being a firefighter, with the vast majority of them hiding beneath the surface and literally under the skin. One of the most common ways that firefighters get cancer is by absorbing toxic particles in the air through their skin during a fire. These particles are byproducts of the smoke from fire, and yes, they seep through the heavy exterior of the firefighter's suit. Studies have shown that on average, a firefighter has 5 times more toxic carcinogens, the evil smoke byproduct, in their body after fighting just one fire than they did before. Because of this, firefighters have a 9% increased risk of getting cancer and a 14% higher risk of dying from it. Acknowledging, let alone really recognizing the significance of the mental health of those within the fire world has only become something more acceptable to openly do within the last 10 years at most. Before that, and still in many places now, there has been no help for those who need it. To ask for help was seen as weak and needy and left firefighters feeling ashamed that their trauma didn't disappear after a day. Thankfully, there is a push nowadays to have a lot more readily available resources, both on-site and off, for everyone involved in the firefighting world. The rising knowledge and acceptance for just how important and detrimental the mental health of the firefighters can be has only spread because of firefighters themselves speaking out. All calls are difficult, let alone the bad ones. Another aspect of what hurts the mental health of firefighters is the strenuous shifts they have to work, 24 to 72 hours at a time. In other words, 3 days on, 4 days off. While they're on shift, they need to be available to answer any kind of call at any time. Sleep deprivation is one of the first major difficulties of the job. While on the one hand, firefighting is a job, it is also a lifestyle. Something I've heard that is quickly forgotten is the separation of firefighter from the person underneath the suit and mask. When the natural identity of someone is constantly overlooked and covered with layers of duty and heroism, it starts to rip someone apart. That is why the support system for every firefighter needs to be something constant and reliable. It sets them up for success at the beginning of the day and can save their life in the end. It serves as a constant reminder over and over again that someone has a place and is not just a floating ideal. It grounds them. Mandy, thank you so much for taking me on and giving me as much of yourself and your work as you could. I am so grateful to have been able to visit you and your station and talk with everyone there. This has been a wonderful experience, one I wouldn't have been able to have if you hadn't have been so open and receptive of me. And thank you to everyone here for your time.
Hello everybody, my name is Halle Gustafson. For my senior project, I wanted to do something that was special to me. When I was a little girl, my mom would always say that she thought I could be a wedding planner. That initially sparked my interest and made me think maybe this could be a future career path for me. I started my search for how I could possibly find someone to trust me to plan their wedding, which, at the time, I was freshly 17, so no wonder no one wanted that. I started to email a few wedding planners through their websites. That's where I found Kristen, who runs and owns Forget Me Not Weddings. She opened up and shared everything one could know about the ins and outs of wedding planning. My first step in my project was meeting Kristen for coffee, and I was so nervous. She told me she was from New York and she didn't play around with people with bad attitudes. So I immediately knew that we were kindred spirits. A few weeks later, she asked me to her office for a food tasting for a newly engaged couple. Her and I brought the amazing-looking 5 courses to the couple, and then Kristen told me how to get clients in meetings, which honestly was giving them free food and flirting with them a little bit. The next piece to my puzzle was finding an actual wedding to help with, and Kristen was planning one for the best couple I could have asked for. I came to where the wedding was being held, which was a super nice country club. I walked in and met the couple for the first time. Their names were Hunter and Hunter. I started my wedding planner in day training off with getting the bride her morning dose of alcohol, which she called her Sparkle Fun drink. She began to talk to me a bit, and we became friends quickly. I then gave her the nickname of Huntress, so the groom wouldn't have to make awkward eye contact with me whenever I'd call out Hunter. The next day I came back for the rehearsal, which was pretty much just walking through how the wedding would go the next day. The plan was to have the ceremony on the golf course and the reception and after party in the ballroom. The wedding party practiced how to walk down the aisle, where to sit and stand, as well as exit. Everything was just as it should be, and I was super excited for the next day. The following day, I got to the country club at about noon, and I noticed the sun still hadn't come out yet, so I was a little bit worried. But it said it would probably clear up by 5, which is when we were supposed to start. I went out to the golf course to put some handheld fans on each seat when I felt a raindrop hit my arm, which pretty much meant we were screwed. So I ran inside and told Kristen what was happening. I then went up to the bridal suite to tell Huntress what was going on. In her usual fashion, she was already a few Sparkle Fun drinks down, and she said that she didn't mind where she got married as long as she was still going to get married. So Kristen, her assistant, and me ran back out to grab all 70 chairs from a now flooded golf course and bring them back inside to have the ceremony take place in the ballroom, which was already set up for the reception, but whatever, we move on. About an hour later, it was almost time to start the ceremony, so I lined up the wedding party, and I got to sit and watch the wedding of Hunter and Hunter, and it was absolutely beautiful. After all the sweet stuff, I went back up to the bridal suite to bustle Huntress's dress, which for me was getting on the floor and trying to pin up this chick's dress while she did her happy sparkle dance on top of me. Once all that was taken care of, it was time for dinner and dances. I was really excited about the dinner because Kristen told me that we would get something super fancy. But when all the employees of the wedding party were called down to the basement wine cellar, I knew that that wasn't happening. It ended up being these make-it-yourself burgers, which honestly really wasn't that bad. But what was bad was the weird DJ guy sitting across from me at the table, who was asking me if my eyes were really blue, or if I had ever DJ'd a wedding before, or if he could play me his super awesome Katy Perry mashup. The last thing I did was happy hour and the after party. This was the most chill time for me. I handed out glow sticks and cowboy hats and listened to Kristen call a man super fine and other things I can't say right now. My experience showed me that I can work under pressure without getting stressed out, and showed me how quickly I can form meaningful relationships with the people that I interact with. I learned that wedding planning is really hard work and takes a lot of dedication and patience and lots of time. This was something I've always wanted to experience firsthand, and I am very grateful for the experience that I received. This was absolutely a positive in my life. My experience was very cool, and I couldn't have done this without Kristen, but I really couldn't have done this without my parents. I don't know where I would start in this project without them. So thank you, Mom and Dad, and thank you all for your time.
A bunch of water on myself. So, I'm Oscar O'Mara, the senior, obviously. And my senior project is called For the Story, but I'll get into that a little later. My project was an obsession for walking up and down big hills outside. Essentially, for the summer and first 3 months of school, I spent every weekend driving up to Boulder, sleeping in my car, and waking up from 1 to 4 a.m. to go hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park. I'm lost. Sorry. On these hikes, I interviewed people on why they themselves spend time outdoors and on the trails to help myself understand why I fell in love with these mountains, and maybe get a unique perspective on why others did too. From these interviews, I gathered quotes and wrote them on signs at the top of each of my summits. The goal was to do every 13er in the park, and at the top of each mountain, I would hold my sign with a quote I collected that applied to the given day. The goal stemmed from my time at summer camp, where I spent months hiking and backpacking around these exact mountains. And I wanted to conquer the park that inspired me to start hiking in the first place. I'm supposed to talk about my gear, but I'm wearing pretty much all of it on me. As you can see from my photos, I spent a lot of time with these clothes and this backpack on that I don't have because I forgot it. And my team that did almost every hike with me knows that these remained unwashed for the entirety of my project. On a more serious note, Clive and I did a lot of prep work to make sure that we were ready for these intense hikes. For example, Clive and I practiced setting up and belaying off of my house to make sure our gear and process worked correctly.
Hello everyone, and thank you for coming tonight. My name is Clive Justice, and my journey through Waldorf is a little different than that of my classmates. I joined the Denver Waldorf School in first grade in 2013, and stayed with mostly the same class until the end of 8th grade when I decided to join Littleton High School. However, halfway through my junior year, for many reasons, I decided to return to DWS. Around this time, I also joined a search and rescue team, and simply decided that I would do that for my project. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines search and rescue as the search for and provision of aid for people who are in distress or imminent danger. The type of search and rescue that I did for my project was backcountry. We're a voluntary extension of South Metro Fire Rescue that focuses on finding and helping missing and injured people in the backcountry. The team I joined was the Arapahoe Rescue Patrol, which was founded in 1957, and until a few months ago, it was the only search and rescue team run by high school students in the world. There is a chief staff and a board that manages financials and medical licenses. However, the rest of it is run by high schoolers like myself. Obviously, I had the goal of eventually responding to calls and helping people in the backcountry, but in addition to that, I also wanted to expand my own set of skills to be able to apply them in my own trips as well. However, all of that was in the far future for me as junior year wrapped up and I prepared for my first training. To become a full member of Arapahoe Rescue Patrol, you must first get off probation. There are a few requirements for this. Firstly, you must be on the team as a probationary member for at least 6 months, and then pass a long list of trainings. June was the busiest month for me by far. It started with a weekend-long training called Basics 1, that essentially introduced all the probationary members to what search and rescue was, as well as some basic techniques. Right after Basics 1 is a week-long in-class training. Each day is focused on different topics, such as medical practices, patient packaging, hazmat, and technical rescues. Thankfully, we had a 1-week break in between the in-class course and the second round of field training, Basics 2. Basics 2 is quite similar to Basics 1. However, this time it was slightly different. I quickly realized this while standing in shin-deep water in the rain at 1:30 in the morning and hearing over someone's radio that the make-believe patient for the scenario was found completely okay by another team. This was quickly followed by the information that no, they were not going to pick us up, and yes, we had to walk back to camp in the rain for 5 miles. Fortunately, it was clear skies for the rest of the weekend and everyone's moods improved. After Basics 2, I became eligible to go on actual calls, which was initially very exciting until I talked to a few members who'd been on the team for a while and found out that some of them had to wait almost half a year for their first call. It turns out that since everyone has smartphones and Garmins and whatnot, not a lot of people get lost. In addition to that, our team is based out of Arapahoe County, which means that we're not usually the first team called to incidents in the mountains. Nevertheless, I waited patiently with my gear ready, and to everyone's shock, it didn't take long. On July 11th, at 2:13 a.m., my phone went off. The page says to meet at our headquarters at 5 a.m. to assist Lake County Search and Rescue in a search for a 70-year-old female in Leadville. The next day, at around 7 a.m., we arrived on scene, were briefed, and began searching the area for our patient. Now at this point, with my full 35 minutes of real-world experience, I can tell you the odds were not in our favor. Our patient was a 70-year-old female visiting from Florida. She had dementia and was a heavy smoker. In addition, we knew that she was only wearing one flip-flop, had no water with her, and had been missing since 3 p.m. the previous day. The temperature that night had also dropped to 38 degrees. It did not look good. Throughout the day, other resources were called in, such as drones, search dogs, and even a plane. Even the tourist train along the mountain's edge that ran at one side of the valley was instructed to keep their eyes out. After 7 p.m., a call from a hospital in Denver reported a similar description to our patients. However, this turned out to be a false alarm. At this point, team morale was at an all-time low. and with that little spark of hope gone, the day's fatigue began to take its toll. As the sun set, a call from a 911 operator came over the radio, announcing that someone on the train had seen an older woman who didn't look very happy, sitting on the edge of a small cliff below the train. We quickly took ATVs up to the spot where she had last been seen, and sure enough, she was sitting there waiting for us. Besides being a little grouchy and dehydrated, she was otherwise unhurt. We moved her into a truck onto the train tracks, and she was quickly taken to an ambulance. Driving back to Denver that night, I went over it in my head. I couldn't remember the last time I felt this content and happy. Through July and August, I continued to attend trainings. A requirement to get off probation is to get your wilderness first aid certificate. This is a standard medical certification for backcountry guides. The course was not hard, but it seemed to grow in difficulty every time the textbook said, call search and rescue. Summer turned to fall, and I continued to go on trainings, and every once in a while, a call. The next call that stood out to me was a 62-year-old man who went missing while metal detecting. He had been missing since the previous evening, and it had snowed the night before, but the day was warm, and by around lunchtime, all the snow had melted. Around 12:30 p.m., my teammate came across our patient face down with his foot facing the wrong direction. At first glance, it was obvious that we were hours too late. Later, we found out he had an underlying heart condition, but it was never confirmed if that played a role in the incident. Surprisingly, the mood at command was light. The sheriff had ordered a pizza for lunch, and we even took a group photo with all teams present. While the outcome was not what we wanted, we still viewed it as a success. Everyone had done their jobs perfectly, and sometimes there's nothing more you can do. It is hard to explain without sounding crass or disingenuous, but the attitude towards incidents like this is never somber. Everything is viewed with a growth mindset and treated as a learning opportunity at the very least. Fall became winter, and calls slowed down. Most of the search and rescue events I attended were trainings and meetings. At this point, I was off probation and a full member. Winter is a slow time for Arapahoe Rescue Patrol. We are rarely called to avalanches due to our location and extended response time. While we were rarely called, the team did attend a 3-day-long avalanche seminar hosted by Summit County Search and Rescue. And even though we were outside all day in negative 21 degrees, it was by far my favorite training I've been to. This training was incredibly beneficial for me as it opened my eyes to the importance of avalanche gear. Throughout the season, I had been backcountry skiing with another person who helped Oscar with his project, Parker Vollings. Now, before this, both of us had adopted the idea that we didn't need avalanche gear, we simply never got caught in an avalanche. With this rash and frankly stupid attitude, neither of us owned a complete set, and we went on trips like this several times. Sorry, Mom. But as soon as we came back from avalanche seminar, I immediately went shopping. As Oscar mentioned before me, I was fortunate enough to be included on his project as well, and able to help out with some of the more technical climbs. For the most part, this completed my secondary goal I had set out for myself. When I signed up for search and rescue, I did it because I thought it would be a cool experience and an easy way to learn some new tricks. And lastly, to prove to my teachers that I actually did something, here are all the trainings and certifications I attended and received over the past 7 months. In total, I spent 369 hours between June 2024 and January. And out of all those hours, only 39 were for incidents. I think that does a good job of showing how much preparation goes into being ready for a search at all times. I want to thank my mom and my dad for supporting me throughout all this and putting up with my schedule that changed every day. I want to thank Oscar and Parker for keeping me motivated, including me on some super cool trips. I want to thank Ms. Shope and Ms. Baldwin for keeping me on track. And finally, I want to thank everyone on the ARP for everything they've done and continue to do. I want to leave you with one last thing. The most commonly accepted motto for search and rescue is, so others may live. But tonight, I want to close with a different motto. Support search and rescue, get lost.
Hello everybody, my name is Art and thank you so much for coming out here today. For my senior project, I decided to build an arm wrestling table. Going into the project, I didn't really know what I wanted to do at all, and it had to be something I've never done before. For a while, I was pretty set on trying out modeling, and I already had a few places that I was going to reach out to, but the longer I procrastinated, the less interested I became. After recognizing that, I figured out that I really wanted to make something with my own hands instead. One of the things that I am particularly passionate about is fitness, and knowing that a friend suggested that I make an arm wrestling table, which though vaguely related to fitness, sounded a lot more interesting than a more cognitive task. I like the idea of building something with my own hands, as it would allow me to feel like I really have control over what I'm working on. And even though it wasn't directly related to my initial interest, I thought it would be a unique opportunity to try something a little different. My first step to begin work was finding a mentor, and what made that a little challenging was that I couldn't pick anybody from the current faculty. and I didn't know anybody else outside of school who would be specializing in woodwork. However, I soon learned that our previous woodworking teacher, Mr. Dunn, would occasionally visit the school, and as he's no longer working here, he was the perfect fit for the mentor position. He gladly agreed to help me out with that, and I was soon able to proceed to the actual building process. As he only visited the school every few weeks or so, for the most part, I was working with the current woodworking teacher, Cameron Archer. After finding the mentor, my second step was to come up with the design and sketch it. After some research online, I was able to find a blueprint on the New Zealand Arm Wrestling Association website, which had the perfect layout for what I wanted to make. Then I had to pick out which woods I'd be using and buy them. I don't know much about how strong different woods are, so I followed Cameron's advice and went with poplar and Douglas fir. After purchasing the building materials, I had to cut them and assemble. I had to purchase the building materials, and assemble them together. When it came to assembly, I primarily used tools like the drill and screws, as well as some clamps. The first thing I had to learn was how to properly drill the pilot holes to ensure that the wood wouldn't split. That whole process made the whole building process take twice as long, because for each screw I had to first make a pilot hole. When all the pieces were finally put together, it was time for detailing, and the sander came into work the most, as every surface first needed to be sanded before I could apply wood polish to it. Prior to sanding, I also had to fill all the holes with small wooden plugs after each screw was in place, which Cameron had insisted would make a big difference in the look of the final result. He was right. One challenge that I faced was attaching the wooden pegs to the top of the table, which are typically used for leverage. What particularly made the whole process difficult was figuring out how to glue them in place. At first, the idea was to use a small wooden platform on the underside of the table that would be supporting them from underneath. However, as we were running out of time, the decision was to first use epoxy to glue them in place and then slowly fill the gaps in from the top with super glue to ensure stability. Another challenge that I faced but was unable to overcome was the warping of the wood, which can happen when freshly cut planks are assembled while they still have moisture in them. That resulted in gaps that would appear after everything was put together, leaving the top of the table slightly lifted up from the supporting beams at the corner. It also affected the legs of the table, making them slightly uneven, which made the table wobbly. As an attempt to fix that, I tried sanding down the bottom of each leg, which slightly helped, but ultimately did not resolve the issue. The end result was a fully functioning arm wrestling table that was specifically designed to withstand pressure. Typically, an arm wrestling table includes 2 elbow pads for support on each side, where competitors place their elbow, as well as 2 pin pads where the hand of your opponent goes to declare a win. It also includes hand pegs for extra support, which are used by the non-wrestling hand, and 4 sturdy legs, which are often used for leverage. During this project, I was able to learn how building something new and carpentry in general is a lot more than just cutting and screwing wood together. I learned many new woodworking techniques, like how to treat wood so it wouldn't crack in the sun, or how to correctly drill the pilot holes to ensure that the wood wouldn't split after the screw was in. I've never worked with wood on a large scale like this previously, never anything like carpentry. So the whole process was a very new experience for me, and every step I was learning something new. From correctly measuring and cutting the wood to assembling the pieces in a way ensuring everything was durable, each part of the project taught me new woodworking skills. It was both challenging and rewarding as I gained a deeper understanding of how materials come together to create something practical and sturdy. However, it was only after reflecting on my work to create this speech that I realized the main lessons I learned from this project. One thing that stood out was learning the ability to stick with something that may not be the center of my attention, as the project soon became a mundane extension to the school day, often requiring me to stay multiple hours after school on a weekly basis. I also had to learn to adapt to a flexible schedule, as I had to shift things around to make time for building, personal interests, and more. And also the ability to reflect on my work, which felt new to me because I usually don't think of the things I've accomplished once the job is done. But more importantly, I developed the ability to be able to step out of my comfort zone and seek new lessons. And Cameron made sure I learned that by making me work through things on my own instead of handing me the answer. Oftentimes when I would ask for directions on how to do something, he would reply with, "Use your best judgment," which really frustrated me at first because I had no idea what I was doing. But he later explained that his thoughts behind that response was to cultivate independent thinking without relying on things being handed to you. In the end, I'm very happy with what I made, even though it was a tedious process. I learned a lot about what I can make with my own two hands, and I'm very grateful for the support of both Mr. Dunn and Mr. Archer. Thank you all so much for listening.
It was 5 minutes past 0900, and Liara's world was ending. Those were the first words I wrote, before I had plotted the outline of my novella, before I had drafted the chapters or come up with the characters, before I even knew how the story was going to end. It was 5 minutes past 0900, and Liara's world was ending. Hello, I'm Lucas Delgado Cheers, and this is the creation of the anchor ship Tchaikovsky. I've been writing stories for as long as I can remember. I used to love making comics in elementary school, and then I graduated to writing the first chapter or so of several different books on the family computer. Nowadays, I enjoy creative writing assignments, and I write on my own for fun. However, I do not enjoy actually finishing things. I tend to think things over in my mind for too long, polishing and perfecting stories before I ever write them down. And then, by the time I sit down to type, I'm already bored of the story. I'm done with it. For my senior project, I wanted to challenge myself to do something I know I'm bad at, finishing the entirety of the first draft of a novella, The Anchor Ship Tchaikovsky. Starting out, I knew I was going to write a sci-fi novella, but the actual form that story took went through many iterations. At first, I wanted to write a sort of compilation of vignettes, each from the perspective of a minor crew member aboard the long-haul space cruiser, the Tchaikovsky. In this advanced future sci-fi world, spaceships can instantaneously travel through warp gates, sort of doorways in the fabric of space, punched out by ships with special equipment. But in order to build these warp gates, anchor ships must first go out to these far-flung locations and drop the anchors, or location transmitters, for the punched ships to punch to. Think of marking a piece of fabric with chalk before you put a needle through it. Working on an anchor ship is a dull job, involving months at a time of plain old, slower-than-light travel, the sci-fi equivalent of cargo shipping. I wanted to focus on what the crew would get up to during these long stretches of monotony and dry routine. I wrote one of these vignettes, a story about a botanist smuggling an illicit strawberry plant aboard the spaceship during a rare port of call, in a creative writing class in junior year, and it inspired the whole idea of the Tchaikovsky. There's a QR code to read that draft on screen now. If you choose to scan that code, please be aware it contains PG-13 language. However, when I met with my mentor, Kylie Marshall, who is an author with the publishing house I interned at last year, she encouraged me instead to write a traditional linear narrative story, with one protagonist, the newly established head botanist of the Tchaikovsky, Liara Cho. I only sort of listened to her advice. I also have a second protagonist, or a deuteragonist, if we're being fancy. That's the second most important person to the narrative, just behind the protagonist. So with Kylie's help, I worked through plotting the outline of the story, sort of overarching skeleton of what I wanted to happen. I took inspiration from various models of story planning, including author and literature scholar Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, or monomyth model of storytelling. This is a 12-stage story structure that takes the character from their ordinary circumstances through the beginning, middle, and end of an adventure, and then back to the ordinary world. I toyed with this model for a while, and in the future I would like to play with it more, but in the end I decided it didn't work best for the story I was telling, as I envisioned this novella as the first installment of a larger story. Instead, I went with a much simpler 3-act structure, setup, conflict, and resolution. After I laid out the skeleton, I then did several passes to pad out chapters, adding a little more detail each time. So the first pass might look something like this, with missing pieces having this little TK mark. This TK is a drafting trick designed to preserve momentum in writing. It stands for to come, as in more detailed description to come, or this scene to come. Historically, it's abbreviated as TK instead of TC, because it's easier to distinguish it from an intentional final draft element. And, nowadays, When writing on a computer with a search function, you can easily find these placeholders, as TK appears far less often in the English language than TC. I had to do this many times throughout my writing process, although strictly speaking I should have left them until I was done with the whole first pass, and my first draft is still littered with them. This is extremely uncomfortable to me. I am not used to writing anything down until it's exactly how I want it, or very nearly there. It feels vulnerable to let anyone read this draft, to let people see the mistakes, the awkward wording, the holes and missing scenes. For me, this is why writing a draft is hard, and I had to pull myself back many times from going over a chapter again and again instead of moving on. When I was having fun with this novella, I found myself joyfully sprinkling in all sorts of sci-fi jargon, bioblast and matter reclaimer and holoscreen. Then I realized that I simply did not have the time or the page space to do the kind of world building I wanted. There's no one definition for the length of a novella, but they're generally between 10,000 to 40,000 words, give or take a few thousand. For context, this whole speech is about 1,400 words, depending on how much I ad-lib. That's not a lot of space to create a detailed and believable world. I had to figure out how to cut what was unnecessary while keeping true to my story. I also learned that when I'm given a long deadline, I will procrastinate. I lost interest in writing the anchor ship Tchaikovsky in about November, when I was done with the complete skeleton of the story. These past few months, while fleshing out the outline, I've had to force myself to slog through. This is the point that I would usually abandon the project if I were writing for fun. However, I did have a deadline, and I did have to get this done. So, following the advice of several popular authors, I set myself timers to work on my project. I experimented with timing, but found that the longest I could actually be productive for without taking a break was about 30 minutes. So I'd set a 30-minute timer, and for that whole duration, I was only allowed to work on my writing or sit there if I couldn't. No getting distracted with research, no scrolling social media, no getting up to pet the cat or get a glass of water. I could write, or I could sit. I ended up sitting in front of my unchanging screen for probably several cumulative hours. I can't say it was super fun, but I did end up typing any possible idea I had in order to fill time, which was the point. As best-selling author Jodi Picoult says, you can always edit a bad page, you can't edit a blank page. I have a lot more empathy now for authors who take years to publish new books. It's incredibly hard to force creativity when it doesn't want to come. I've learned a lot about the process of writing throughout this project, as well as my own creative process and my strengths and weaknesses. The no distractions, 30-minute timers really humbled me. My ability to sit with boredom needs to be exercised, just like a muscle. I learned that I have a lot of new, intriguing ideas, but I have to train myself and practice the follow-through. I do want to be an author in the future, and this project has helped me identify which of my creative skills I need to hone in order to get better at the craft. This experience has been valuable in giving me a taste of the real writing process, and I'll take the lessons I learned into, hopefully, my future writing career. So, if you'd like to read a sample of my novella, that code will be on screen now. And I'd like to thank my mentor, Kylie, for helping me through this project. And thank you all for listening to my story, to the journey to the anchor ship Tchaikovsky.
Hello everyone, and thank you so much for being here tonight. It truly means a lot to me and my classmates. We are so excited to share the projects that we've been working incredibly hard on, and I'm thrilled to walk you through mine. My name is Koryanka Avant, and I've been part of the Waldorf School community since I was just 4 years old, so 14 years now. Being here feels like home, and I'm excited to present something to this community. The name of my project is Behind the Closed Doors. This title reflects my deep curiosity about what happens behind the closed doors of a hospital. If you've ever waited anxiously in an emergency room for a loved one or hoped a loved one would come out of surgery without complications, you know that sense of uncertainty. It's both ominous and awe-inspiring. I've always been intrigued by the medical field, especially surgery, and I wanted to take this curiosity to the next level by fully immersing myself in the life of a surgeon. To understand the high stakes, the decisions, the terminology, the tools, and the mental focus it takes to perform life-saving or life-enhancing procedures.
For a long time, I've been interested in neurosurgery. The idea of helping people on such a grand scale, working with the human brain, fascinates me. My grandmother even went a life-saving neuro procedure after a car accident, which deepened my appreciation for the skill. This experience inspired me further to explore the medical field and see what it's really like to work as a surgeon. It deepened my curiosity when Tara Gregory came into our classroom. She talked to us about her line of work, and she talked to us about cancer and the research her and her team did, because she's an oncologist. She shared an incredible opportunity with us, the chance to watch her perform a bone marrow harvest, and I jumped at the opportunity. And along with Kaylin, we headed in early one morning, and what I witnessed was mind-blowing. Dr. Gregory and her colleagues literally put their entire weight on a patient as they inserted a metal tube into his back to extract the bone marrow. The crunching sound, the precision, everything about it was so amazing, and I was hooked. I knew I wanted to see more. Dr. Gregory also connected me with Dr. Mesa and Dr. Liu. Dr. Mesa specializes in breast cancer and general surgery, and Dr. Liu is a neuroendocrine surgeon. Dr. Mesa was incredibly kind, and she took me under her wing. She explained not only the surgeries I observed, but her own journey into the medical field. She shared how challenging it is to become a surgeon, and how important it is to push yourself because nobody else will. She also gave me valuable insight into private practice, how it differs from working in a hospital, and how much freedom it can offer once you've gained enough experience. Over the course of this year, I had the chance to observe a variety of surgeries. From morning until the very last case of the day, I was fully immersed in the world of surgery. I also went on rounds with Dr. Mesa. This meant checking on patients post-op and further on. I have to admit, at first, I got very lost in the hospital. It's like a maze. But eventually I got the hang of it, and I couldn't believe how easily the doctors made it look. I witnessed firsthand the compassion and emotional intelligence required to be a good doctor. She taught me that different patients need different approaches, depending on their age, demeanor, and specific needs. I also gained an appreciation for the mental fortitude it takes to work in a high-pressure environment like surgery. I felt what it was like to stare into the stomach or the side of someone's body. I was exposed to the anatomy of an open human, and I felt the life in front of me that was being worked on. This feeling was like the realization of Beau. This job is where you can literally have someone's life in your hands. The sheer responsibility of having someone's life in your hands is both humbling and inspiring. I learned that I can do well in a surgical environment, and I don't get nauseous or antsy. I found myself fascinated and asking tons of questions. I learned that I can thrive in a surgical environment, and I could see myself pursuing this one day. So some of the surgeries that I got to watch, I got to see a spleen removal using a robotic system, multiple hernia repairs, tumor removals in the bladder, lower abdomen, and the kidneys, a mastectomy, and a gallbladder removal. There was a moment when I was in the hospital and I was watching Dr. Liu remove a gallbladder, and all of a sudden I heard like, "Oh, I nipped it." And then I proceeded to watch gallstones and bile spew out, and he remained pretty calm, and he just said, "It's gonna take a little longer." During my experience, I also got to see the cutting-edge Da Vinci 5 surgical system in action. I was actually able to control the machine with a controller and watch the robot arms mimic my every move. I was surprised they let me try it because these machines cost multiple millions a piece. It was very surreal. The fact that surgeons now are able to perform such large surgeries with these robots is crazy. It looks like they're playing a video game when they're using it. I even witnessed kidney removal with the robot, and the team created small incisions to guide the rods that the machine would go through in the stomach. The most jaw-dropping part about this experience was they placed the kidney in an airtight bag while it's still inside of the stomach, and sucked the air out and removed it through one of the tiny incision holes. So that was amazing. I was surprised to learn that when a scalpel cuts through the skin, blood doesn't spill everywhere like you see in the movies. Instead, it kind of trickles out slowly, or in some cases, hardly at all. And at the end of the kidney removal, I was able to go into the lab and touch the tumor that was inside the kidney. It was a surreal moment holding a human kidney in my hand, and I was shocked that I had a body part in my hands. It was also interesting to feel a connection to the patient. For instance, if they were nervous, I could almost feel it with them. One day, as we were walking to OR2, Dr. Mesa told me that they were conducting a surgery on a boy's lazy eye, and she told me to peek through the window of OR1. I peered in that direction, and I just remember feeling uneasy because they were shoving tools very deep in his eye, and it looked so intense that I just watched and stared and thought to myself, like, are they actually helping him? I also now know what burning skin smells like when they cauterize it. At first, it's very odd, but you adapt. It is also a very clean environment in the OR, and they are very strict about sanitation rules and what these rules are. And I came to the realization that not all surgeons are as serious and blunt as they're conceived to be. In fact, during most surgeries, I would be listening to Taylor Swift or hearing them sing along to musicals. But I also learned that surgery might not be my life's calling. This journey has been incredible, but it is a grueling path, and not one I'm sure I can dedicate my entire life to. The hours are long, the work is demanding, and the sacrifices are huge. But I have the utmost respect for the people I've worked with, such as the doctors, nurses, and the medical professionals. They've shown me what it truly takes to succeed in this field. This project has completely changed the way that I view the medical field, and it's given me a deeper understanding of what it means to be a surgeon. It's not an easy job, but it's one that can truly make a difference in people's lives. And who knows, I may continue exploring other areas in medicine because the possibilities are endless. I'm so grateful to everybody who helped me on this journey, especially Dr. Liu, Dr. Mesa, and Dr. Gregory. And I would like to thank you all for being here tonight.
Hello everyone. My name is Arwen Obed, and for my senior project, I chose to pursue music composition. When it's time to choose a senior project in junior year, it represents a year-long commitment to a subject each student finds meaningful. For me, this decision was easy. I wanted to do something that would allow me to work with my own schedule while also being something deeply personal and meaningful to me. Music has been a big part of my life since about the 3rd grade, so it did not take a lot of thought to become my choice. I have played various instruments over the years, but the piano is the instrument I have stuck with. Because I have played it for so long, I decided that focusing on piano wouldn't be fair to myself, because I would only grow in a place I was comfortable, familiar with, and already going to do. Up until this point, my studies have been pretty much learning and performing existing compositions from established composers. While this provided me with the skills to read treble clef and bass clef, know flats and sharps, as well as figure out a time signature, it left little room for creativity, as I was limited to the symbols on the page. I had not yet created music of my own, and the thought of composing pieces was both exciting and intimidating. However, as I began to compose, the things that were in the beginning the most challenging to me became easier and more like habit. Before my first lesson with my mentor, Tom Giomi, I was full of ideas. I could already imagine grand symphonies, the blending of strings, keys, and brass playing out in my mind. But my enthusiasm was quickly destroyed when Mr. Giomi asked me to improvise. I found myself frozen, playing nothing more than a basic C chord in my left hand, while my right hand played the already chiming notes. This experience exposed a deeper issue. My frustration and insecurity were holding back my ability to express myself musically. I do feel like a shy person when it comes to being creative. This is something I've noticed with myself. In school, it's easy to be an extrovert because the people around me have been my shell since before I can remember. Every day for the better part of 12 years, I have spent talking, learning, and sharing thoughts with these people. When outside of that environment, I am very closed. Beyond being frustrated with the fact that I couldn't translate my complex pieces in my head, I felt embarrassed to even play one note. This stopped me many times from using crucial moments of teaching to my advantage. This experience forced me to see the difference between my expectations and the reality of the composition process. Despite years of playing the piano, I found myself unable to produce something that I felt was worthy of playing. I constantly struggled with feeling incredibly inexperienced. The once beautiful instrument became a daunting and life-sucking task. Every day I had to sit down and feel bad about myself that I could not compete with the prodigies of my age. I questioned whether I had made the right choice in pursuing composition and whether it was too late to change my project. As the months progressed, Mr. Giomi and I began to look at the fundamental music concepts, like chord progressions, the circle of fifths, and kind of the anatomy of scales. We also incorporated listening assignments, exposing me to a big range of composers and musical styles. This broadened my view of so many different styles and moods of music, as well as set me up to start composing. Though simple, I started to move about the chords instead of attaching myself to just one, and already I was overcoming my first mental battle. I thought the actual creation of the melody in the song was the hard part, until I was asked to write it down as a score, because up until that point, I had just been writing letters around where they were placed on the staff, and the only issue with that was I could read it. No one else could. There was no time signature, no rests, and no guide. So this nearly made it impossible for me to revisit my compositions once I forgot how they went. The first time I attempted to write a formal score, it was pretty much a complete disaster. My treble clef sign was backwards, and most of my bass clef notes were in the wrong place. As a flutist, I live in the treble clef, so switching between the mindset of a pianist and a flutist was particularly difficult. Something that I appreciate that Mr. Giomi had me do was write my first couple piano scores by hand in a physical notebook, really connecting me to the music in the process. I had to work out the melodies and do all the math. This gave me a gateway into multiple instruments where the timing is much harder. Throughout this journey, like everyone's, there were highs and lows. When I finally reached a place where I could manage multiple chords and melodies, I felt a huge sense of accomplishment. This also had a big impact on how I listened to music. I could hear the bass line, the melody, the harmonies, essentially taking apart a piece in my mind, discovering why the piece worked so well, and what about it I liked so I could find similar music. Despite these moments, it was far from easy. I had significant setbacks, particularly when it came to performing my work. My early improvisations were too simplistic, and I often found myself second-guessing my abilities. After one particularly tough performance where I received critical feedback, I felt defeated. This prompted an important conversation with Mr. Giomi, where he reminded me that music, like language, is a form of expression. Not everyone will appreciate or understand your expression, and that's okay. This conversation was huge in helping me overcome my insecurities and reframe my approach to music. It was a reminder that art is subjective, and my expression had value, regardless of how others perceived it or wanted it to be done. One of my biggest challenges was performing in front of an audience. After my initial struggle with self-doubt, I pushed myself to perform at a recital organized by my mentor. The setting was familiar to me as I have been a student with him for years. The only issue was that this time it was my piece. When I stepped up to the piano and sat down, I felt my throat close up. As I looked at the keys, they all began to change, and my hands would not leave my lap to play. After a couple seconds of freaking out, I had to breathe and pretend no one was there, then lifted my hands and played the first notes, then the next and so on until the piece was completed. To be quite honest, it was a blackout for me, same as when I play sports. In volleyball, when I go for a hit, as soon as my first step hits the ground, I go off of only habit and practice. This is what happened for my piece. The second performance I did was at Thanksgiving with my family. My cousin played the piano part I had written while I joined in the flute. After performing for a group of strangers, this time was much easier, thus again proving to myself that my mental blocks could be overturned. Writing for multiple instruments, especially for instruments I do not play, proved to be one of the most challenging aspects of this project. To write effectively for these instruments, I had to learn new clefs and notation systems. After initially writing my compositions by hand in a physical notebook, I began using an application called Notion, which allowed me to create a more polished score. This tool made the process of composing much easier. I was able to complete my first multi-instrument piece, which unfortunately I cannot share with you tonight due to time constraints. Instead, I will present a shorter composition, which I hope conveys the same depth and meaning. I don't think I will ever stop composing and learning different styles. I have learned so much and come so far. Any form of non-verbal expression is so precious and something I feel is mandatory for everyone. Composition has connected me with people from any time and any place, because I can feel what they feel. Classical or jazz, music's ability to convey emotion and storytelling has been for me the driving force of this project. Because music is only heard, it is so important to continue to play it. Because if not, years of emotions and history would be lost. Taking away from this project, I am more patient. I do feel as though I can problem solve and organize my thoughts better. Beyond myself, I have a new view of people through the eyes of music, and I am forever grateful for the opportunity to show and speak about my growth with you all tonight. Before I introduce my piece, I would like to thank my mentor, Mr. Giomi. I have been a student with him for around a decade. He is always patient and kind, and his support has been invaluable. He has guided me through the highs and lows of this project, helping me to confront my insecurities and overcome mental barriers. His mentorship has been a gift I will always cherish. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share my journey with you tonight. It has been wonderful to speak about my growth as both a composer and an individual. I hope this piece I am about to perform serves as a reflection of the process I've made and the lessons I've learned along the way. This piece I wrote is called Ode to Waldorf, and to me it is a representation of how I remember a day in my life in kindergarten. This day is the accumulation of all my memories from that time. Playing this piece are some of my classmates, Cohen Church, Mila Ivano, and Henry Lottridge. Without them, hearing my music live wouldn't be possible. So thank you guys so much.
Hello, my name is Chris Kaiser, and I've been attending Waldorf schools for my whole life, both at the Santa Fe Waldorf School in New Mexico and the Denver Waldorf School here in Colorado. I moved to Colorado because my old school had suddenly shut down, which was heartbreaking because I loved the community that I was in and I wanted to find that same feeling of warmth in Denver. My senior project is pottery wheel throwing, and my goal for this project was to learn a new skill, keep on improving on that skill, and learn from my mistakes. Ever since I can remember, I've always wanted everything in my life to be perfect. So during this project, I wanted to learn how to be content with impurities and to understand that really nothing is perfect. The reason why I chose to wheel throw is because I wanted to be more in tune with myself. I have been solely focusing on school for the last 4 years, and I have not been taking good care of my mental health. And the one thing that has always brought me comfort in my life is nature. That is why I chose to pursue pottery. It is like indoor-outdoor living. I get to be with nature, but instead of actually being outside, I get to bring the mud indoors and make the house dirty instead. Pottery allows me to literally mold the earth in my hands and to make something beautiful that won't harm the environment, since clay is infinitely reusable. I also believe that pottery allowed me to erase the negative connotations of flawlessness in my head, giving me the opportunity to be fully present in my work and to finally let myself relax, since my hands were too grubby to check emails or work on an atom write-up. At the beginning of my senior project, I had no clue on where to start, so I decided to take a pottery class. The first class I attended was the Art Students League of Denver. During this 5-week course, I learned how to wedge, cone, compress, set depth, set width, pull walls, and trim my pieces by my wonderful teacher, Keith McConnell. Also during this time, I got myself a mentor, Carrie Berry, who I met at the Burrow Days Festival selling pottery in Fairplay, Colorado. She was a great help, checking in on me weekly, giving me helpful tips, and inviting me to her house to learn to make handles. I loved having the weekly checkups with Barry because I knew I could never slack off and never not do my best. I also had to remind myself that she was a random stranger who decided to help me for a whole year with nothing to get out of it herself. Knowing that made me want to improve and show her that helping me was worth it. After learning the basics of pottery wheel throwing, I attended a second pottery class at Stone Bear Studios, where I learned from Meadows Madsen, who taught me how to center my pieces with a new technique and how to apply wax and glaze my pieces. I liked attending this pottery class because I could use what I learned from the last class to make something that I truly loved. The one piece that I loved but sadly passed away was a mug. During the wheel throwing process, I accidentally threw the mug's bottom to be too thin. The mug was about to collapse until I hastily grabbed a lump of clay and slapped it on the bottom of the mug. This new technique that I created was not well liked by the potter community, so I hid it and hoped it'd be fired anyway. I never got it back. I don't know if it got thrown away, burned to death in the kiln, or if someone stole it. I did learn my lesson though, and after that I learned to make extra thick bottoms. But sometimes I still think about that lost mug. Once I got the hang of wheel throwing, I decided to get my own pottery wheel. This was a lifesaver, since I could wheel throw whenever I wanted and focus on what I truly wanted to make, rather than what my instructors wanted me to make. I also loved being alone. During my pottery classes, I was the youngest person there, and I even had to lie about my age since I was 17 at the time. I did not mind being the youngest, but everybody else was not a beginner in the beginner class, and they all knew each other. It was also hard for me to focus on what I was doing in my classes since I focused on everyone else. After I got my own wheel, I could listen to my own music and be in my own space, which helped me tremendously to get in the groove and enjoy throwing again, since I could put my full attention on my work. In the end, I created 17 pieces, with many others dying from bisque firing, over spinning my wheel, or my cat knocking my pots over, which was really sad, and I didn't talk to him for a whole week after that. I have learned that pottery requires not only time and effort, but patience. Whenever I was struggling with leveling my walls or centering my clay, the solution was always to take it slow and to be calm, to let the clay move through my fingers, trusting the process and knowing that whatever I made, I would be proud of. I also learned not to let outside influences affect me. When I struggled the most, it was because I wanted to be more like a particular potter, to have smoother walls, be more creative, or to learn a new skill faster. These emotions of jealousy led me to delete all social media apps, since they included wheel throwers. After I deleted them, I felt much happier, and my sleep and stress levels improved. Once I sorted all my exterior problems, I made my favorite bowl. This bowl went very smoothly, with leveled walls, a perfectly rounded center, and an equal amount of clay distribution throughout. The one aspect that made it unique, which I loved, was the flowered petal-shaped top. It made it look so much different than all my other pieces. And it was the first piece that showed no flaws in my eyes since I stopped striving for perfection. I had many struggles along the way, including burnout, getting scammed on eBay, and having nowhere to eat since the dining room was replaced with a pottery studio. I also had many issues with the type of clay I bought. The clay that I used was low-fire clay, and not that many pottery studios in Denver fire at that low of a temperature. This led to many delays and extra time and money spent. As you can tell, I had a love-hate relationship with my senior project. I loved the opportunity to try a new hobby, but I also hated being forced to do it. Usually when I'm tired of something, I stop doing it for a while until I get motivated to start it up again. But this time I had to keep on going, which was very hard sometimes, and my family and friends even had to intervene and get me back on track.
I'm so grateful that they did because wheel throwing is now one of my favorite hobbies. From the beginning, my goal was to make a specific object, to make a teapot or tea or plate set. But over time, I learned that pottery is not the end goal, it is the process. Whenever I was at the wheel, my hands would take me anywhere they wanted, and I would make bowls, mugs, or vases, depending on the day or mood I was in. I also learned to be kinder to myself and to laugh at the broken pieces or clay-stained clothes. In the end, I found a fantastic community of potters, and when my Santa Fe school closed, I did not think I'd find that again, but boy was I wrong. On an ending note, I want to thank one more person, my mom. She uprooted her whole life to let me come to this school, and this project would not have been possible without her. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope that this presentation inspires you to try something new, and that it's okay to not be perfect.
Okay, welcome everybody to my senior project presentation. For my senior project, I made this kite shield here, and the special guest who we're waiting on is my fault, by the way. The senior projects took way faster than I was expecting, but he will be my opponent for a fencing demonstration using the shield. So anyways, actually I'll hold on to this. Okay, so you might be wondering, what is this funny outfit I'm wearing? This is my protective gear for my sport. My sport is called Nimah, Historical European Martial Arts. And I've been fencing. I did a little bit of traditional fencing as well, but I've been fencing for almost a decade now. And there are two main reasons why I chose my senior project. One of which was because the Denver Waldorf School has a beautiful wood shop, and it's actually one of the reasons why I came to the school was for the beautiful wood shop. But unfortunately, as a 12th grade student, we haven't had very many opportunities for classes in the wood shop. So I wanted to get back in and do one of my favorite subjects. Additionally, in my 9 years of fencing, I've actually never gotten to use a shield like this. So I wanted to give it a shot and make one for myself. All right. So what is this thing? It's called a medieval kite shield. It evolved out of the round shield that most of you may think of as a Viking shield, because that's how it's depicted in popular media, and it evolved from that to go downwards to protect the legs of cavalry soldiers. That's the theory anyway. So that's why it's shaped like this. And yeah, so once I had decided on my project, I began by contacting my mentor, Connor Chamberlain. He used to go to my fencing club, and I knew he had made shields before. Not a shield like this, but he had made round shields. And he was extremely helpful in getting me started off. He pointed me in the right direction of a YouTube channel that ended up being very helpful for the exact details of the shield's construction. And he recommended that I start by creating a smaller round shield. That shield is incomplete because there were complications and delays for me getting a forge, which I needed for one of the parts with that shield. But it was good starting with that shield just to refamiliarize myself with the wood shop and get back into the groove of things. While I was waiting for the forge, I got started on the kite shield. And the first step for that was going down to the local hardwood store with my friend Art. It was kind of scary, just the two of us there. We didn't really know what we were doing, and we were looking around as big forklifts and shelves with lots of wood on it. And we didn't even really know exactly what we wanted, but we eventually sort of figured that out, got a guy to help us, and they got our wood off of the shelf, and we went back to the wood shop and got started with the construction. From there, the next step was to build the frame that I would bend the shield around, because the shield is bent. And that was really fun. I used scraps from the courtyard, and I used a nail gun, which is pretty fun to use. And then the next step was cutting the wood and cloth to shape and laminating the two. And I have this time lapse here that I filmed, which is kind of cool. And then at the end of the time lapse, you'll see that Cameron helped me bend the shield around the frame. The shield is made up of 3 layers of poplar plywood with 3 layers of burlap that's like a cloth soaked in wood glue in between. So it's like wood, cloth, and that makes the shield quite light, but also hopefully strong. We'll see if it breaks in a moment here. From there, you can see the shield once it was done bending and dried up, and then I put the cover on, and then the last step was to make the handles out of leather, and also the top rim is made out of leather to protect from strikes from above. And the picture is of me wet forming the leather, which is a technique that I learned for this project. All right, there were many challenges during the construction of making the shield. It took many months. There were, of course, obstacles during building the shield. This is my first time ever trying to make anything like this. So I, of course, had a lot of hurdles to get over. But I think it's interesting imagining like a historical armor. How fast would they be able to make one? You know, with enough repetition. They didn't have power tools back then, but I bet that a guy could probably pump maybe a couple of these out in a week. But it took me several months just to make one. So that kind of gives you an idea of the skill that's involved. And then one of the biggest challenges that I faced was actually just choosing the project in the first place. This was my first idea, was to make this, but I bounced around with several different ideas, one of which being learning to tailor, among other things, before I finally came back to this. But coming back to this idea taught me a valuable lesson about myself. I finally came back due to the fact that I heard that my friend Art was actually got approved to make the arm wrestling table in the wood shop with Cameron. And I learned that the people I'm working with are what's really important to me, because that's what ended up landing me on this project. And I also had already known Cameron because he chaperoned the Dominican Republic trip that I went on with the Spanish class, which was amazing. Speaking of people who are really important to me, after I'm done with this presentation, if the shield doesn't break, I'm gonna donate it to my fencing club so that more people there can try it out if they want to. And with that being said, I'll say my thank yous and we will move on to the fencing demonstration. I'd like to give a big thank you to my mentor, Connor, for giving me an important first push in the right direction, as well as Ms. Shope and Ms. Baldwin for their continued support, as well as my parents for their support. And last but surely not least, thank you so much to Mr. Archer for the many hours he supervised Art and me in the woodshop. It really wouldn't have been possible without him. All right, you guys have been waiting for it. I'd like to invite up my fencing coach. Trevor is his name. And all right.
Hey. Oh. This is terrifying. Absolute nonsense.
He got me though, he got me here.
You think you're tricky? You have a wall, it's BS.
Okay,
Wait, hold on.
Oh man, how about that?
Alright, totally fair.
And welcome to night 2 of the class class of 2025 senior projects. My name is Betty Baldwin, and I'm the Next Steps counselor here at Denver Waldorf High School, and I'm so excited to have you guys all here tonight. Over the last year, our seniors have been exploring, creating, expanding, and learning. And all 23 members of this class had completely unique experiences and are so excited and maybe a little nervous to share them with you. Last night, we had 11 of our seniors present their projects. We saw a restored motorcycle, went on journeys into the mountains, heard an original composition, saw a medieval sword fight, and much more. This room was full of laughter and sometimes tears and lots of learning. And I am certain we will feel all of those same things tonight. Laura Shove and I have had the privilege to work with this class over the last year and have witnessed the growth within each and every one of them. We want to thank you for coming tonight and for getting a glimpse of what their senior project process was like. We would also like to acknowledge some other individuals who have been helping in different capacities. Talon, who is helping us with tech, Becca, who has been filming these for us, and all of the high school faculty who have been very gracious with their time and consideration of our seniors. Lastly, a few housekeeping notes. There will not be an intermission. So if you do need to take a break, go to the bathroom, we just ask that if you can, wait to do that in between students' speeches and presentations. Please make sure your cell phones are silent or off right now and for the remainder of the evening. If you're wondering for other people who couldn't be here tonight or if there's something that you might miss, these presentations will be recorded. And lastly, you may have noticed some presentations in the back as you were coming in. Some of our seniors had added displays to the back where maybe you can get more information, or maybe it was somebody who presented last night who you weren't here for it. So please know that after the evening is over, all the lights will be back on and you can ask questions to them and see their displays. We're really excited for this night and the 12 seniors who are presenting. So without any further ado, we will have our first student kick things off tonight.
Good evening. My name is Felix Molinet, and I'm here to tell you about how following my passion for museums took me from a frequent visitor to a curator. For the past year, I've had the privilege of working as an intern at the Museum of Contemporary Art. Failure Lab is a paid internship that brings in 15 teams from all over Colorado to prepare and execute installations, and overall, learn what it takes to curate. Last semester, we worked with local artist Lily and Laura to create the installation Heartstrings. We were given full creative liberty to conceptualize, curate, and execute our collective vision for the installation. It took a lot of time and a lot of extra hours, but I found that the late night bus rides down the sticks all paid off when opening night finally came. I'll take you through the process of creating Heartstrings, or in other words, the timeline of finding my artistic medium. Brainstorming themes and connections. We first needed to brainstorm a theme or general nebulous direction for our project. This meant combining the minds of 15 teenagers, which proved to be a difficult task. So we each crafted 3 themes and presented them to the group. We found common threads among our ideas and eventually landed on one base theme. Spoiler alert, it was mine. The intricacy of anatomy was the foundation of our creative path for our semester 1 project. With my concept chosen, I was allowed the position of head curator. In this position, I was given the responsibility of making sure our vision was effectively executed by managing the materials and the budgeting, and continuing to redirect us to our former vision while allowing other teams to lead the outcome. I have always found collaboration difficult. Group projects in school have always been a struggle for me, always finding myself taking up too much space or much too little. This position forced me to confront this about myself, and I found that it granted me one of my biggest points of growth throughout this entire experience. Planning space and materials. With our established theme laid out, we began to lay out the logistics. We sketched out our visual plan and began attaching physical material to our vague and, as it would turn out, very ambitious vision. We began to measure and tape up the floor, plotting where our biggest pieces would sit. The space we were given was awkwardly long and slanted upwards like a ramp. We wanted to utilize the strange shape of the room in our design, which changed our original plan. This became a running theme woven throughout the entire process. We would land on one conclusion and would never be able to trust its finality. This taught me that the creative process begs to shift, and allowing it to take its form with every influence produces the truest and most natural result. Once we had a concrete idea of what we needed, it was time to source our materials. This also meant time to budget it. Budgeting proved to be an extremely tedious task. It was my responsibility to manage our finances, which meant it was also my responsibility to shoot down any particularly expensive paths that others would bring up. We had a lot that we wanted to achieve with very limited time and a very limited budget, so we had to find a way to compromise. We had a max spending opportunity of $1,250, which meant that it was time to hit up the Goodwill bins. The bins were the main source of most of our materials, excluding paint and installation tools, which ended up almost entirely being fabric. And we also happened upon a few strange items that we just couldn't seem to part with. We collected every red piece of clothing we could find, which was the main medium for almost the entire installation. It's incredible what you can repurpose into art, with items that would likely have reached a landfill. I learned that there is opportunity for creation in everything. We saved a lot of money and waste, which made our end product even more rewarding. Finally, we were able to start creating. We were all extremely excited to start after so much time spent on all of the necessary preparations. We spent the majority of our time in this chunk of the process, creating our 3D paper mache art piece you can see here, and our sewn heart tunnel that we designed. Also, shout out to David Key's parents for moving the week before we needed an absolutely ungodly amount of cardboard. Our workspace looked like this literally 24/7, and as it turns out, making art is not a tidy affair whatsoever. I just had so much fun. I loved being around so many like-minded people who were there for the same reasons that I was. I loved being in the space, conversing and thinking and making. I already missed this period of my life so much, and I can't wait to find spaces like this in my future. Installation is where all the puzzle pieces you've been working on for weeks or months start to click together. We first hung the chicken wire on the walls that had just been painted and began plastering. We used the leftover fabric from our sewn heart tunnel for our wall piece. We wanted to create this sort of liquid waterfall dripping effect with the strips of cloth. It needed a lot of layers. And I don't think that I have ever experienced such pain in my hands. It took an incredible amount of hours to cut all of these pieces into strips, but it was all worth it in the end, of course. This piece, regardless of the endless hand cramping, was my favorite to make. I loved creating the illusion of depth with so many tiny pieces and playing with such visual texture. The installation process was really strange. One moment, all of our individual pieces were strewn across the floor, and the next, they were up. We tied the heart piece to the ceiling and the 3D arm piece on the wall between the red jungle and cloth. In the section of space behind the heart, we bunched, you'll never guess, more red fabric to insinuate veins. We added our personal art pieces and pictures of the process in the negative space, and just like that, it was opening night. To see all of our efforts over the course of the semester ready to open was almost an out-of-body experience. My loved ones came, my friends showed up, and so many people from school. I really feel as though it's safe to say that this was like one of the happiest moments of my life. I feel so proud of what I have accomplished, and I feel so grateful for this opportunity. Thank you so much to everyone that came. I felt so incredibly seen and supported. Thank you to Malin and my mom and Betty and Bree for the rides to the train station so I could make it to the museum each Wednesday. And I must specifically thank my mom, who sent me the internship application in the first place, and who is always pushing me to stay true to myself and reach for what brings me joy. Through this experience, I have built a wider understanding of techniques surrounding installation and creation, and a grasp on artist management skills. This internship has provided me with the opportunity to hone my interest for creation into a tangible output. I have realized my own capability to curate and how I can apply this to my own future. I don't have to sacrifice my passion to lead a career, it just took a jump. I spent so much time convincing myself of some phantom idea that nothing I could do would land a meeting, and nothing I could make would stick. But there was my name, pressed in vinyl on the wall. This sparked an even greater passion in me, and I know it won't be the last time I'll see it. I feel so honored and lucky to know something so intrinsic about myself from such a young age. And I know I won't be losing this passion anytime soon. Thank you so much for your time.
My name is Nimah, and I will be presenting the impact of art in therapy. When researching what I wanted to do for my senior project, I immediately knew what I wanted to do. I have a strong passion for helping people and have been surrounded by therapy all my life. My mom is an occupational therapist, and through that I've kind of got an eye for seeing things in people and what they may need. Last year during my practicum, I was able to be connected to a child family investigator and therapist, and through this my passion for therapy and helping increased immensely. I learned through this that therapy truly breaks cycles rather than continues them, and that's something I really wanted to explore during my senior project. Art therapy is a therapeutic approach combining art making and play for emotional expression. It helps children who struggle to verbalize emotion, and it provides a safe space to process emotions through creativity. It is built from the foundation of the factors leading back from the 20th century with key pioneers like Freud and Jung, who believed that art and play were allowed for emotional expression and ways to see the unconscious mind. Virginia Axline in 1947 led the first non-directed play therapy session, and Margaret Nuremberg, the mother of art therapy, saw art as a tool for deep emotional processing. Art therapy today is used in schools, hospitals, and rehab centers, and there are over 5,000 credentialed art therapists in the U.S. alone. Programs like the Creative Forces support veterans with PTSD and help children with trauma, anxiety, and behavior challenges. My personal experience with art play therapy started in my junior year whenever I was connected to Leslie Bednar, a child family investigator and therapist. And through this, I was able to sit in on therapy sessions and also help with child family investigation files and research. But the thing that I looked forward to most was every Tuesday whenever I was able to work with a 6-year-old little boy who would come in with his mom and little sister, and we would help him with emotional regulation and behavioral challenges he faced in and outside of school. He struggled with aggression and impulsivity, like grabbing and squeezing people and objects, and would frequently slam doors and run into the street, and that caused a very unsafe environment for him. So, making sure that I was emotionally regulated in these times was essential to make sure that he was also in a safe environment. He felt safe as well. I learned to respond with compassion instead of panic, and I also learned that the challenge of it all and the chaos and problem solving, I truly loved it. And the importance of behavior and the importance of environment truly, reflected how our sessions went. With his mom and sister present, there were a lot more outbursts and it's harder to engage with him. The behaviors that I spoke of before were reflected, and there was a lot of attention that needed to be seen. But with his dad present, it was a lot smoother. And he was a lot calmer, and he was, excuse me. But the activities and techniques that we used were grounding activities and occupational therapy techniques, and we even offered to start seeing an occupational therapist. It seemed that he was disconnected from his body, and we needed to implement ways to help him feel that he was grounded. So we implemented weighted blankets, compression vests, and this helped him with sensory regulation in and outside of school. He needed a lot of support and connection, and these small techniques made a big difference. I believe that from a year ago today, and where I'm standing now, he has truly grown as a person, and he will continue to. I feel that the way that we speak to ourselves and others truly matters, and rewriting the inner dialogue of that is essential in life. I have been able to shift my perspective of therapy, and I've seen it as a way of growth and healing and reconnection to oneself. I see art play therapy as more than art, it's a bridge to healing, and a tool for resilience and self-expression. It has created a lasting impact on me and solidified my passion for therapy, and it has inspired me to continue learning the mind's transformative power. I want to be the catalyst for growth and ultimately unity. And I encourage us to all create spaces for support and understanding, because whenever we do, we help people feel seen, heard, and valued. Thank you for your time.
Hello everyone, my name is Ingrid Gregory. I've been in the school since first grade, and it is so exciting to be up here presenting my own senior project. My project is titled What Were You Wearing?, which actually isn't a title I came up with myself, but is literally what it was. So I'm pretty creative, I know. But before I expand further, I want to give a slight warning about my project. I'll be referencing sexual assault and some topics that may be too much for swimmers, particularly the littler ones among us. Hi, Augie. Use your discretion and feel free to step out at any time, because it is a heavy topic. I was drawn to the idea of spreading awareness in a way that I thought was palatable and would translate well to my audience. It took a while to figure out what I wanted to focus on because there are literally so many things to choose from. However, after sitting through 3 years of the same conversation, assault's bad, here's a video and some graphs, I decided I wanted to try my hand at making a difference. The idea brewed in my head for a while at the end of junior year until I decided I had had enough. All I could think was, there's got to be a way to get people to listen. I was tired of every other week hearing some comment or joke that truly wasn't funny. I'm not talking about loud or obnoxious bits or typical teenage humor. I'm referring to the comments that you're thinking of now. The ones that stick with you. Don't flatter yourself, it won't happen to you. That doesn't sound like a joke at all when I was sitting here saying it, but when I heard it, people were laughing. Now, I'm not here to rip into anyone, but truly no one's laughing now, so why say it in the classroom? There's actually a reason why it's said in the classroom, on the bus, at work, and at the dinner table. Learning is boring unless the topic affects you. That's why, as a system, as a school, and as people, we need to teach people in a way that sticks with them, just like the comments I've heard. Rape culture is taught, or rather a lack of listening creates it. So how do we get our peers to listen? Let's start with what you were wearing. Through social media, I had seen a few art installations of clothes. The mission of these galleries was not to show off some new fashion trend, but rather the walls were lined with sweatpants, onesies, swimsuits, and military attire. They were all clothes that survivors were wearing when they were sexually assaulted. I wanted to emulate that feeling of somber determination I felt at seeing those clothes. It felt like a way to get people to listen, instead of speaking into the void. Maybe if people would see just how normalized assault has become, they could understand why I cared so much. That's when I decided to create my own showing. So I started by brainstorming, as you do. I had a few questions to answer, like how do I get the word out? Where do I display them? And how do I get the clothes in an anonymous way? Those questions were pretty broad and complex, so I came up with my best guess at how to conquer my own personal hell, which was announcing something at the all high school meeting. It turns out it was a lot worse than hell. I will come back to that. After announcing my projects in high school, I had to figure out how to receive the clothes in an anonymous way. That was my goal the entire time. I stole some cardboard boxes and labeled them accordingly. For the next month, I'd open the boxes and nothing. Since the announcements didn't work and the boarding box was returning up dry, I needed a poster. Lila, with her epic canvas skills, as she says, saved me. The posters worked, and I had teachers and peers asking about my project. There were many, many complications with the space I was going to use. In total, I considered 4 spaces. Each had a different location. The 4th one was the one I landed on only out of necessity. I set the day of the showing before February break, the 15th from 4:30 to 7 p.m. All the sudden changes and uncertainty meant that I was short on time and I needed a solid plan. And I wish I could say there was a plan, but I only had the concepts of a plan, so I had to work with that. The week leading up to my showing was really chaotic. All I could think about was my project. As I stumbled towards Saturday, I was freaked out, to say the least. On Thursday, all felt lost as the room I was going to decorate was gigantic, too big for what I could accomplish in a day. On Friday, my support team helped me. My mom, Lila, Chris, and a mentor all boosted my confidence about hosting my showing on the handwork stairs. Lila helped me set up late on Friday, taking many trips to different places for materials. The hardest part of the entire setup was finding how to hang the clothes from the brick walls. We tried a few methods. And my mentor and I even considered hanging them from the ceiling tiles. But eventually, we just bought a buttload of command strips and kind of hoped for the best. After a few attempts and many adjustments, we had the clothes hung and the respective stories from the donors next to the clothes. At this point, it's key to mention that they weren't all clothes. A razor, song lyrics, and Burger King crown were among the hung items. I was so nervous, but the setup was done. Although spread out throughout the night, many teachers, family, and friends showed up. I'll never forget the hug me and my mentor shared, since we had only seen each other through Zoom until then. I came out of that night extremely proud and giddy. I felt like I had a product that was worth all my time spent planning and rushing by materials and answering awkward questions. With that, I sadly have to address how hard this project was. I can't really describe the mental toll that thinking about sexual assault all the time puts on a person. My project always included closed-door meetings with Ms. Shep and Betty, followed by hours of reflection for myself. I even had to get my therapist involved in talking through my struggles I had with this project. Because of how heavy it is to think about, my bandwidth for working on it was small. I could only do so much at a time, and talking about it and explaining it was tiring. Now, if I had a nickel for every weird and inappropriate question I got asked about why I did this project, I'd have enough nickels to throw at everyone who asked me questions. But instead of throwing things at everyone, I'll answer why I did this project. When I announced my project to the high school meeting, in hopes of receiving clothes, the array of facial expressions I saw told me enough. The laughter I heard as soon as I said the word assault felt like a black hole was opening in the room and I was yelling into it. I felt so disheartened and embarrassed because my point just flew over people's heads. Even though my plans fell through and I had to scramble to get the showing done, feeling unheard was my big struggle. But after the meeting, something changed. It became clear that I was not alone in my goal of getting people to listen, and small messages of support began to pop up on blackboards around the high school. Now, I'm not saying I started a revolution or anything, but a cultural shift did occur, and I learned it was worth it. I learned that people are listening. They may not show it like yourself, but they are. Just because I can plan an entire project centered around sexual assault does not mean that everyone can talk or think about it. I didn't get as many clothes as I expected or wanted, but that doesn't mean that my project was unsuccessful. I've come to terms with that through all my conversations with teachers and random people who told me how impactful the mere idea of the showing was. I have pictures of the things that people wrote around the school, and to me that display of solidarity is just as impactful as seeing what people were wearing. To see that I wasn't alone and to know that people were listening was enough to push me through to right now. Throughout this process, I learned to speak up. I've become more confident in my values and sharing them with others. I'm also aware of my bandwidth now and can take care of myself while navigating a heavy subject. I really tried to challenge myself to step out of my comfort zone and lean into the natural confrontation my project brought to me. I've had many uncomfortable conversations, and I'm not afraid to say how I'm feeling now. But I've also learned to listen to other perspectives and relate them to my own, instead of viewing them as alien. Tonight, if you have reflected on jokes you've made, or feel more aware that your words are being listened to, good. Keep that feeling within. Don't take it as guilt or an opportunity for insecurity, just listen. Be the person that listens and learns. I'm not just saying that to the ambiguous you, but I'm saying that as a message to myself. I learned to listen to myself. I learned to listen to others while balancing my needs and their perspective I bring to the table. Being a passerby and holding your thoughts within is easy. Speaking up is hard. Even though this was my idea, I would not have followed through without the many people who helped and supported me on my journey. I'd first like to thank my mentor and executive functioning coach, Michaela. Other than helping me plan my weeks and to study, she's inspired me to pursue my chosen degree, and I'm very grateful to continue our relationship at CU Boulder's biology program next year. I'd also like to thank my mom, who set aside her work to help me plan my showing last minute. She brought me mini cheesecake to calm my nerves and used her smarts to aid in the decision of hosting my showing on the stairs. Lila hates anything sappy, so thanks, dude, you're a real one. Finally, thank you to everyone who came to my showing. You all made everything this project I hoped it would be. Thank you for listening.
Hello everybody, my name is Liam Gregory, like Ms. Baldwin said, not related. And I'm going to tell you about my senior project, fundraising in medicine. So before we start, I wanted to give a big thanks to my two mentors, Josephine Scott and Kennedy Strecker. They helped me so much throughout this whole fundraising process, and I can't think of them enough for all they've done. So let's go on to what is my project and why did I choose it? So I've always been really interested in medicine. I'm actually thinking of becoming a doctor. So I really wanted to explore something within medicine. But I've already got a lot of different opportunities from my mom, who works in a hospital, to really see different aspects of what goes on there. So I wanted to try something new. And that's when my mom showed me the Student Visionaries Program. So what is the Student Visionaries Program? The Student Visionaries Program is a 6-week fundraising program run by a company called LLS, or the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, where students who are either seniors or juniors come together to make teams of students to fundraise for blood cancer. And whoever raises the most money within the 6-week period is crowned Student Visionaries of the Year. So there's 3 things you can really fundraise for in Student Visionaries, and that is research, advocacy, and patient support. Out of these 3, I really wanted to do patient support, and that's for several reasons. So the first reason was it's actually one of the most underfunded of all of them, which I thought was very interesting to me, because if you're not really able to pay for, getting treatment for cancer, you're not really going to be able to get benefits from things like research or advocacy. So I thought it was very important. Another reason is what you see up on the board, is because of my grandma. So sadly, when I was very young, just a baby, my grandma passed away of blood cancer. I really wanted to use this as a way to give back to her and other people who are suffering from blood cancer, to maybe give them some more time, to spend with their families. So now that you know a little bit about what this project is, let me tell you about what I actually did. So before fundraising even started, I had to work on some stuff. So the biggest thing was putting together a team of students, some of which you guys actually might know, such as Cohen Church, my sister Laura Gregory, Annie O'Mara, as well as some of our own seniors here, which Kaylin Stanley, who you'll see hopefully coming up, as well as Aaron Open, who went, last night. The other thing I really had to work on during this time before fundraising was something called corporate sponsorships. So corporate sponsorships are kind of what they say on the tin. That's where you go out to business people and ask them for money. And boy, I will tell you, I was nervous. Kind of like what's going on now. But, it was just a great experience and all. At first, like I said, I was very nervous about it, but as I kept meeting with these people and really kept doing it, I really learned and, was able to present how, passionate about this I was. So now we move over to the next stage, and that is, 1 second. I swear I remember what I actually did. Which is the kickoff. So the kickoff is when fundraising starts, and boy was this an exciting start. So during this time, we sent out all our emails, all our letters to everyone who we wanted to donate. And we actually were able to see great results. We were the highest fundraising team of the first week, and that was incredible. It made me so excited and so proud of my team during this time. But as I went on, I realized I kind of had to learn some more about, how to manage a team. I kind of learned not everyone's going to feel comfortable going out to business people or even their family members and asking them for money. So I had to learn different ways of getting people motivated and different ways to ask people to really make them feel ready to go out and ask for money. And then I want to bring you guys to the gala. So the gala is this big celebration where a bunch of all the other candidates and everyone comes together to get student visionaries crowned. But before I talk more about that, I want to tell you about what I was actually trying to raise. So my goal was $150,000. Might seem like a lot, but I was actually able to make that a week before fundraising ended. So what I actually made was $185,500. So to put that into context, the runner-up made a little less than half of what I did, and I actually broke the record for fundraising of our district in Denver. So suffice it to say, I won. You know? And I did really get a lot from this. I learned a lot from this, and I was so happy to be able to do Whoops. So, a lot of things I learned from this project, and the biggest one was managing a team. I kind of said it before, I'll say it again. Some people were great. They were off to the races, you know, they were fundraising, they were doing incredible, whereas other people, you know, they needed some more, you know, support and more like kind of follow-up to get there. But it was a great learning opportunity to learn how different people, you know, like to conversate and get motivated to do something. Another big one was definitely the corporate sponsorships. Kind of, I think, helped me with this. Hopefully, we'll see. But it really did help me, you know, reach out to other people I've never really met before and show how passionate I was about this and really share that. And I think that shows in my final donation number you guys just saw. And the last, but certainly not least, was being able to meet all the amazing people I met along this way. So many different people from medicine, from business. It was so incredible. And I loved meeting every single last one of them. And you also might see this funky number, wondering what that is. That's actually what we were all able to raise together as a candidate. We were actually, as you can see, $500,000. And that's what I'm really proud of. And I really kind of want to leave you with this message of, you know, you can do great all by yourself, but you can do better with everyone else. And thank you, everyone, for coming to my presentation.
Hello, my name is Eli Von Fleischer, and my presentation was painting instruments. I was initially unsure about what I wanted to do. My finalized idea was actually ended up being quite different from my original thoughts. At first, I considered teaching myself animation, as I occasionally dabble in art. However, as I continued thinking about this, I realized, am I really going to sit myself every single day and teach myself for an hour? Let's be honest, no. So that idea is crossed off the list. So back to square one. I reflected on what I would enjoy doing, while also finding it challenging. It dawned on me that I should lean towards something related to music, as playing bass guitar and music in general is my biggest passion. I decided on something like that, but I was unsure how to proceed. I thought about joining a band and performing, but I was already doing that through a program called School of Rock, so I wouldn't really be accomplishing anything good. One day while researching ideas for my senior project, my mom suggested painting guitars. I thought this was a great idea since it connected my passion and my occasional artistic endeavors. I remember wanting to paint my first bass guitar to express myself because I thought it would be cool. I had previously been inspired by the legendary Jimi Hendrix, who painted a Stratocaster and Gibson, which he later smashed on stage, which I will not be doing, even though at times I got frustrated and really wanted to. But I had never gotten around to painting it, so I viewed this as a fantastic opportunity. Initially, I was quite timid at the thought of possibly ruining the guitars once painted, so we bought relatively cheap ones to minimize the loss if I messed up. This project was a blend of my hobby and art, pushing me out of my comfort zone. I usually stay close, relatively, in my comfort zone to reduce stress and mistakes. But with college approaching, I realized I needed to become more comfortable stepping outside of it. There are most of my projects I would think, oh no, I'm going to ruin them every try something new, but then they turn out fine, except for one. When finding a mentor, it went also pretty smoothly. My mom connected me with a woman named Monica, who during quarantine customized and painted surfboards for sale. Once we confirmed that this arrangement would work as a mentorship, the plan was set up. We collaborated on the best methods to paint these guitars. Once we communicated regularly, and I updated her on my progress, while she suggested the best and most innovative and various methods to customize them. There were a few bumps in the road as I started painting. Most of the issues involved the paint chipping, having to switch from high quality paints to lower quality ones when I was running low on both paint and time. Another issue was the paint sometimes got into areas that they weren't supposed to. Occasionally there were smears if I wasn't careful, but those were easy to fix. Additionally, smearing my paints became very dependent on warm weather. If I attempted to do this during cold conditions, the cement might not cure correctly or could become brittle and crack because of freezing temperatures. I ended up completing 6 instruments in total. The first one was an acoustic guitar, featuring a simple sunflower design. I wanted to start with something not too intimidating, since I'd never tried this before. I simply removed the strings and used a Sharpie to create the design, making it the easiest project and the one to give me the least trouble. Then with my confidence growing, I jumped straight into one of the most complex designs for the next instrument, which was a jellyfish ukulele. I completed this with acrylics, but as time went on, I found that acrylics took a few days to dry completely, which took even longer when parents touch it when they're not supposed to. This resulted in some dust accumulating on the paint job, though it was noticeable I couldn't fix the problem without fully stripping the instrument, which I preferred not to do. So I kept it as it was and asked my mentor for advice on avoiding the issue in future. The next one then was also ukulele, where I decided to go back to a simpler design. This was inspired by our family vacation in 2016 to Hawaii. I attempted multiple types of materials for this piece. First I tried acrylics again, but they were too messy. Then I used a pencil marker, but same problem. So I eventually settled on white colored pencil, which worked much better. The next piece occurred during a time when I was sick because I was being a system of a Victorian child, which led to the loss of motivation. I struggled to stay motivated throughout this project, honestly, especially since I find hobbies less enjoyable when time limits are imposed. Coupled with not feeling well, I found myself overwhelmed with schoolwork, and honestly I just became a bum and simply didn't feel like working on it. As a result, this piece became my lowest effort work, where I applied a lot of gold leaf and just called it a day. After feeling guilty about this piece, I knew I had to lock in on the next one, so I painted or attempted to paint Star and Egg. This came with a lot of expectations, and I would say it was pretty far from what I wanted. It was turning out pretty well and I was enjoying the result, but I ran out of white paint for my good acrylics, so I had to switch brands. That's when I started going downhill. The white I used looked horrible and wasn't solid. I kept trying to gently remove it, but ended up taking small amounts of paint, which led to more tripping. As a result, it ended up not being exactly what I wanted due to all the chips. But I had to accept it. The last piece, the one I was most excited about, was my personal base, which ended up giving me the most trouble, and I realized why I haven't tried this yet. The original plan was to use airbrush, but I found that'd be way more work than I bargained for, and I had to do many layers. And when I saw I was practicing on cardboard, the airbrush would stop giving out all this consistent amount of paints, and I had zero patience to try to deal with that. So I ended up trying to do acrylic paint. This is a bad idea if you're using stencils. So the paint went everywhere except for where it was supposed to. And at this point, I was out of time and had no choice, so I just completely stripped it. I plan to spray paint it and try again, which hopefully this won't give me so many issues, but if it doesn't, I just give up. So with all the instruments completed, my original plan was to donate them to an organization that auctions off painted guitars at a low price for kids who can't afford them at their original prices. When I contacted this place, although they informed me that I had to be a personal artist within their program, meaning it had to be a consistent commitment beyond their senior project, so that was a no-go. So now I plan to probably sell them on Etsy because anyone will buy anything on Etsy. So we'll see how that goes. But I want to thank again my mom for suggesting this in the first place, my mentor Monica for helping me throughout this, and my mom again for making sure I stayed on track.
Good evening. My name is David Nevis, and my project is called AWOL. I've been making music since the freshman year of high school and learning along the way. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry, I'm a little sick. I'm really grateful to all of these people to listening to all this music because during in-class assignments, I would use it as an opportunity to make music. And so I would play this music for them and I would get responses, whether verbal or through body language on what worked and what didn't. So I first used the name AWOL for this project because I liked the way it looked in all caps. But as time progressed, the name garnered more and more significance. The definition that the Google AI told me was absent without leave. But I find myself wanting to break the confinements of everyday life. And for me, the creative process was just that. When I started making music in freshman year, I was making some of the worst audio man had ever heard. Genuine trash to the average consumer. But as time went on, each song I made got sequentially better. So right before my junior year ended, I had my sights set on what I wanted to do for my senior project, make a full-length album. With this idea in mind, I had started to flesh out, the world in my head, sonically and visually. I was an idiot with a plan. But before I tell you the story of how I got to stand before you all tonight, I'd like to thank and introduce some of the people that helped me get this done. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. I'd first and foremost like to thank Tucker and put all the quarters for the videos together. He handed me his SD card after filming, and this was on it. So, not my fault. Along with shooting some of the footage and putting it together, Tucker was an instrumental piece in making this happen. I cannot sing his praises enough. I'd like to thank Adam Johnson for coming with us to shoot the music videos and getting some of the best photos I could ever ask for. He truly is an inspiration to me. I'd like to thank Clive Justice and the Justice family for letting me shoot on their property. And last but not least, I'd like to thank Oscar O'Mara for sitting in the studio with me, listening to the good, the bad, and the unlistenable. Oscar was one of the first people to tell me to keep going, and has put up with me sending demos for the past 4 years, listening to every single one of them after I text him 3 times and call him twice. A demo is sort of like a sketch in drawing. It's a song which is very unfinished, but you're able to understand the gist of it. For me, that looks like some drums, maybe a pad, or just and some vocals. It's really not fleshed out at all. So the beginning of making AWOL was really rough. I was listening to lots of Dominic Fike and the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and at the time, I wanted to make a rock album. The problem is I didn't know any music theory, and I don't play guitar, and I'm just one kid with a computer in a basement. So I kept making bad rock demos. And I saw this video of Dominic Fike where he said, making music is like showering. If you don't do it every day, you stink. And this inspired me to try and make one demo every day, which led to a lot of variation and experimentation in the songs themselves. I probably made over 50 demos that summer, and most of which are really bad, but hey, that's a part of the process. I kept calling Oscar, asking him, did you listen to DSG? Did you hear Quattro? Sam Sulek ate my car, family business, working for Mohair. Imagine if Ninja got a low taper fade _2. And he had heard all of them, but he told me he really liked one called Breathe. I personally didn't think this demo was that good, so for a while, I completely disregarded it. In August, right before I went to Europe, I made a song called Rectal Redwood. I had the name from the song in my head before I even started to write it, because I thought it was funny. After this was made, I completely changed the direction from a rock album to a hip-hop album. I showed Oscar the song, and then he got quite excited to start to make music again. And he still kept telling me about this demo called Breathe, which I, again, completely disregarded. When I got back to school, I started to make better demos. I finally listened to Oscar, and I finally worked on Breathe. It turns out he was right on this, and considering I will show it to you today, or at least show you a QR code and how to get to it today, he was right. I had made the first demo of things that I really like Hounds, 70, 8 Ball, Tsunami. These are all like songs that I'm making. In a 2-month span, Oscar would come over and play FIFA, we would look at music, and occasionally he would write or help write a verse for the song that we were looking at. A lot of the time, it was him writing a verse, and then me being like, okay, like 2 words of this are usable, and then we would go from there. Which really was cool for me. I felt like for a lot of the time that I was making music, I was just by myself. So having someone to actually do that with and learn with and partially teach was great, but it was the blind leading the blind. And although he's not technically savvy with the program that I used to make music, the offhand suggestion would sometimes make the song better, even if it took him 2 minutes, or even if it took me 2 minutes to understand what he was trying to say. He'd say something like, "Hey, can you make it sound purple?" Or, "I hate that fuzz." And most recently, "The fourth ding is too loud." Trying to interpret what Oscar was trying to say is like attempting to learn from someone who speaks your language very poorly and you speak theirs very poorly. Eventually the message gets across, it just takes a long time and is quite frustrating. I would try different plugins and effects on the sounds to try and make what he envisioned, and after about 2 minutes, I would eventually get there. You know, the actual process of the album didn't take that long in retrospect, but life got in the way at almost every turn. It was very tough for clothes to be produced when Tucker was playing club volleyball. There was always a tweak needed for a song, and songs got swapped in and out of the track list almost every month in 2024. And most importantly, I am not where I want to be in terms of technical skill. I'm still learning how to mix. I'm not as confident on a microphone as I would like. And my voice, when recorded, can sound quite bad. But nevertheless, I put it together. With all that being said, the progress that I have made is night and day. When I first started making music, I was intensely uncomfortable with the microphone. The mixing was doing more harm than good. The instrumentals just sounded terrible. And it took a very long time for me to get to the point of where I am today. Me too. Even from the beginning of making this album to right now, the progress has been remarkable. I learned how to make drums sound better. I started to learn piano. My mixing has gotten better, and my overall grasp on music has improved. I've learned about good form and discipline, and I don't intend to stop anytime soon. The reason I say I'm not close to where I want to be is because of who I want to be compared to. I understand that what I'm making right now is not on par with what the greats make, but I firmly believe that if I continue learning, striving to be better today than I was yesterday, and tomorrow than I am today, I can truly make something great. I was recently on YouTube watching videos on music theory, learning how to mix, how to manage my time better, and one of them said something that really stood out to me. An idiot with a plan beats a genius without one every single time. And, you know, I thought to myself, that's me. I'm an idiot with a plan. I truly have no technical expertise. I'm just an idiot who has done enough trial and error to release 7 songs. Today, I'm standing here and I've finished recording the album. And I realized that I've just talked about music for however long this took me, and I haven't played you anything, so on screen right now is a QR code to a music video for that upcoming album. You don't need to listen to it right now, but if you are interested and have like 3 minutes free, I think it will be worth your time. Speaking of your time, thank you for it. Good night.
Hello, I'm Tucker Laserhake, and over the course of the past months, I've worked to create pieces of clothing through a process of fashion upcycling to be used in the music videos of AWOL. The concept of the project was to create themed and cohesive outfits to be used in music videos related to David's project AWOL. The biggest part of my inspiration for this project was my love for clothing and fashion. Creating clothes has always been sort of a secondary passion of mine, one that I haven't always had the most amount of time to dedicate to it, or, never had a good context to do it. With this project, I was able to take a really deep dive into an art form that I have a lot of love for. Before I continue, I'm going to address 2 terms you'll hear me use. The first, upcycling/fashion upcycling, and the second, fast fashion. Upcycling, as opposed to recycling, is to take something damaged, used, or otherwise in an unwearable shape in the context of clothing, and repair and update it instead of reducing it to materials to make something else. And an example I like to make is water bottles. With water bottles, you take the plastic, you melt it down, and you form it into, a new water bottle, or occasionally it's recycled into some other plastic product. With upcycling, you're taking something, say a shirt with a stain on it, and you're adding a patch on it, or you're changing it or altering it in some way to give it a second life so that you don't have to throw it away. The other term I'll mention is fast fashion, which refers to an industry of clothing manufacturing where quality and often ethics are sacrificed for cheap mass production. Oftentimes the garments made in fast fashion are really low quality and fall apart or degrade quickly, which feeds into this system of a new trend comes up, people are excited, wow, this is really cool clothes. I'll go and buy that from H&M or Shein. And then by the time the next trend comes around, it just so happens that your pants are starting to fall apart. So hey, let me go get pants from this new trend. It's a cycle that feeds into itself. The amount of waste it produces every year is unimaginable, and not to mention the pollution that the factories are putting both into the air and water. Some of the biggest offenders of this are companies like Shein, Zara, H&M, and Forever 21. My project was done somewhat in conjunction with David Neffs's AWOL. What I've done specifically for my project was create 3 full outfits that shared themes, color palettes, and overall design choices that reflected the collective vision for AWOL. To begin, I did a lot of concepting and idea generation for the overall look of the project, which involved making Pinterest boards and sketching out ideas, and a lot of discussion with David about where we wanted to go with things. But once we decided on that vision, I had almost complete control over what I actually created, which is why, thank you, Ms. Baldwin, for being allowed to do a joint project like this. Also, I will say, concepting and sketching are words David Hulk heard a lot during this project. And it was basically my terms for saying, I'm not really actually doing anything, I'm busy, and I want to make it sound like I'm doing something. So I was concepting and sketching a lot. After the overall look of things was decided on, I started going to thrift stores and going through my own clothes, finding things that were damaged, stained, or otherwise pieces I didn't think people would wear, and began planning for each specific piece what I would do with it. And yeah, like I said, it also included clothes of my own that I literally never wore sometimes, that I was planning on throwing away. After that, I started cutting and sewing, which I was doing even until the weekend before this project was due. In terms of technical ability, the biggest things I learned were more detail-oriented. Things like how to make certain types of seams, and how to recognize the quality of garments that you find at the store. I didn't get a picture of it here, but when you have a chance, the pants that David's wearing, there's a seam down the side that I kind of winged it. It was the first part of the pants I did. It doesn't look very good. You can see the stitching on the outside. There was a lot of learning moments like that, where I would do a seam or put together something and go, that doesn't look right. And that's where a lot of my learning came from. It was a lot of very detail-oriented stuff. Also, like I mentioned, there was things with finding the quality of other garments. There was a pair of pants that were a mall brand. I think they were Zara. And when I was deconstructing them, I was like, there's only a single stitch on the side of the legs. Also the ones David's wearing right now, where I was frustrated trying to take them apart because they were Dickies, and they were really well constructed. And I was like, dude. I think the biggest lesson I've taken away from this project, more than anything, is dealing with life getting in the way of things. Because for a lot of this project, I was juggling school and sports. I would have 3, sometimes 4 nights of club volleyball a week. And then the other 3 nights of the week, I would be working on a write-up for Mr. Newman, or one of many, many essays for Miss Yannick. Until almost January of this year, I pretty much couldn't work on my project because of, the dedication, the time dedication it takes to even finish one piece. I learned that even just 45 minutes or an hour here and there when I could made a big difference to relieve stress. And yeah, there were absolutely some late nights spent on this project. But I think the 2 biggest things that kept me pushing through was 1, my enjoyment and love for making clothes. It is, if I wasn't going into the career path that I'm looking into, which is graphic design, and I really had the resources to, I'd absolutely try and go into the fashion industry. And the second thing that kept me pushing through was David constantly bothering me, asking me if I had worked on anything yet. Which, like I said, the common answer was, I'm concepting and sketching. Don't worry, I'm working on it, I promise. I definitely wasn't. A final note to leave you all with is, I think everyone should get into fashion upcycling. Even if it's just here and there as a hobby. It's the ultimate counter to the fast fashion industry. Taking clothes and giving them second life through upcycling breaks away from the quick-moving trends that produce so much waste every year. If everyone started upcycling, waste, pollution, and sometimes dangerous labor for those in factories would fall away very quickly. So go out and have fun with your own clothes. It might just help save the environment. Thank you for your time.
Hello everyone, my name is Beau. My project is interviewing business owners, a subject that has long intrigued me. I wanted to do something that will not only be interesting, but also help me in the future. Giving me a head start in an area I'm passionate about, business. This project became a great way to gain insight and a valuable experience that would eventually help shape my future career. Business has always been something I wanted to pursue, and I feel this project brings me closer to understanding what it truly takes to run and operate a business. At the core of my interest in business is my father, who owns an Indian restaurant called Little India. From a young age, I had the privilege of observing him manage his restaurant. He would take me with him to see the inner workings of the business, the inventory, the employees, and of course, the customers. These experiences sparked my desire to learn more about the fundamentals of running a business. But beyond just the logistics, I became curious about the human side of entrepreneurship. The people, the relationships, and how business owners balance all of that while maintaining a thriving operation. I wanted to dive deeper into this world by interviewing other business owners to hear their stories. I was especially interested in understanding the common threads that ran through their experiences, as well as what set them apart from one another. One of the first things I had to figure out was how to find business owners to interview. At first, this task seemed overwhelming because I didn't have any direct connections, and I wasn't even entirely sure if I was committed to this project. This is when my friends came through for me. One of my friends referred me to their father, Evan O'Mara, who owns O'Mara Motors. I walked in his house, unsure of what to ask or how to even conduct an interview. I had to learn on the spot. I started to ask basic questions to get a sense of his journey, and as the conversation progressed, my questions became more focused and insightful. His answers were fascinating, and the experience gave me the push I needed to continue with my project. This initial interview made me excited to dive into more conversations with other business owners. But it also revealed a key problem. My questions were not interesting or engaging enough. I started with generic background questions that didn't lead to deeper insight. I quickly realized that I needed to do more research about each business owner before the interview. I needed to understand their story, their challenges, and their achievements. This will allow me to ask more targeted questions that would lead to more compelling conversations. Through my interviews, I spoke to a wide variety of business owners: painters, barbers, restaurant owners, dealership owners, landlords, and coffee sellers. I recorded each interview on my phone, which allowed me to revisit the conversation later and pull out key points. I started asking more specific questions, such as the role their educational background played in their success. This was especially relevant for me as I'm preparing to go to college myself. I wanted to learn about the path these individuals took, whether they thought college was important or how it influenced their business journey. Some business owners emphasized the value of college for building networks and socializing, while others felt that it was a waste of time and money, particularly for those who were already entrepreneurial at heart. One question that I consistently asked was how business owners build and maintain relationships with their employees. I learned that a strong relationship with their employees is crucial to success. When you treat your employees well, they're most likely to be loyal and committed to the business. Several interviewees shared that they build trust by showing genuine interest in their employees. This connection creates an environment where employees feel valued, which is essential for fostering a positive and productive workplace. I also learned something surprising, that in business, it's not always about separating yourself from the competition. One business owner explained that success doesn't come from isolation, or rather from collaboration. By building a community with your industry, you open yourself up to greater ideas and opportunities. This was an eye-opening realization for me. I had initially believed that business owners only needed to be completely unique in order to stand out. But now I understand that collaboration can sometimes be more valuable than competition. Another key question I asked business owners was their initial goal. It was interesting to hear how their aspirations had evolved over time. Many of them said their goal was to help people, whether that meant providing a service that alleviated stress for their customers or offering a product that made life easier. For example, the painter I interviewed explained that his goal was to help homeowners by taking the burden of home improvement off their shoulders, allowing them to focus on their work and personal lives. This sense of purpose resonated with me. It made me realize how essential it is to have a strong why behind your business. The most valuable piece of advice I received from several interviews was to approach college with a plan. It's not just a 4-year vacation, it's an opportunity to build connections and prepare for your future career. I was also encouraged to take risks and push myself outside my comfort zone. If half the people I interviewed hadn't taken chances, they wouldn't be where they are today. It became clear to me that in order to succeed, you have to be willing to fail. Learn from your mistakes and continue moving forward. As I continued to gather business owners to interview, I encountered scheduling challenges. Being in school from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. made it difficult to find times that work for everyone. However, by being persistent and flexible, I was able to arrange most interviews between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. Despite these obstacles, I was determined to conduct as many interviews as possible, and I eventually interviewed 23 business owners. One of the most significant lessons I learned during this process was that if I want to run my father's business one day, it's essential that I learn how to cook Indian food. and of right now, I have no idea how to do that. If I plan to take over his business, I need to be prepared to step in when necessary, whether that's covering for a sick cook or teaching new employees how to make a specific dish on the menu. I also realized that success in business requires more than just technical skill. It requires the willingness to take risks and step outside of your comfort zone. Many of the business owners I interviewed talked about how they take big leaps to get where they are today. If I want to grow in the business world, I need to be willing to do the same. Another important takeaway was that in order to succeed, you need to understand the field you are working in. For example, when running a coffee shop, business owners must have a strong understanding of economics and finance to manage the business effectively. I now understand that my education needs to go beyond just general knowledge. It needs to be tailored to the business field I want to enter. Lastly, through this entire project, I learned that I genuinely enjoy interviewing people. There's something thrilling about not knowing what someone will say next, and it's a skill I'd like to apply into the business world. My ultimate goal has been to gain a broader perspective and prepare myself for the challenges I will face as an entrepreneur. Through all of this, I've learned the importance of taking calculated risks, staying persistent, and not being afraid to fail. If you never fail, how will you learn and improve? I've also learned that perseverance is crucial. If one path doesn't work, you can always find another. I want to thank everyone who was willing to be interviewed and help me expand my network. Moving forward, I plan to keep an open mind, learn through action, and continuously improve. Thank you for your time.
Hello everyone, my name is Avery, and thank you for being here tonight. Despite being feverish and having a very sore throat, I am here on behalf of a lot of ibuprofen and cough drops. Anyways, for my project, I chose to commit to a new sport that I've always wanted to take on, climbing. My project explores the sport of climbing, including its different disciplines, and the physical and mental benefits and challenges. I'll also touch on my personal experience with climbing, and why I find it such a rewarding and challenging activity. Climbing has many techniques and styles, although two very broad terms for them are bouldering and rope climbing. Rope climbing is an umbrella term for various styles, such as top rope, lead, and trap. Bouldering takes place without a harness, yet you only go up 15 or so feet, and the most known and accessible form of rope climbing, top rope, you're harnessed into a rope and secured at the top. I climbed in the past very on and off when I was first introduced, although I'd only ever bouldered. Climbers rank the difficulties of bouldering routes based on grades. The easier the bouldering route, the smaller the number. In the US, they use V1, V2, V3, etc., all the way up to the hardest rated climb right now, a V17. I remember very vividly the first time I'd ever climbed. I went with two of my good friends, one who was climbing for a while, and the other just starting it with me. I remember getting on the wall for the very first time on a V0, a very easy rep, and thinking to myself, this is easy peasy. I then moved up another grade and another. That was until I hit my first roadblock of using my pure strength to get up the wall. And I finally realized this was not going to be as easy as I thought. This was going to need a lot more technique and skill than just purely muscling my way up the wall. I'd gone up 2 grades and could already feel the burn in my forearms, the skin peeling off my hands, and the sweat accumulating in my palms each move up the wall, slowly degrading the chalk and losing more and more grip. That was when I took my first ever fall. I remember being 10 or so feet off the ground on the very last move of the hardest climb I'd ever attempted. It was a bit of a harrowing leap to the finishing hole. I could feel my hands slipping and my strength giving. Yet I had the support of my friends saying, just reach that last hole, you got it. So I leaped out for the last hole, getting one hand on it, but I had no strength left in my arms to control the swing of my body. My legs went flying to the other side, pulling my body off the hole and fully flipping me upside down before landing on my neck at the bottom. This was by far my worst fall yet, although these things happen in the world of climbing, and I've learned to accept that, as I've had many rough falls to this day. By the end of my first ever session, I had been struggling and struggling for that first ever hour or so of climbing, but I refused to just give up another potential hobby, as I'm known to do. You can ask my parents. This is what started my drive to keep climbing. During my bouldering phase, I learned new ways to strength train and improve my technique. This includes kilter and tension boards, which are ways to climb routes set by anyone in your community. They are boards with many holes, containing colored lights behind each one, where specific holes light up for different difficulties of climbing routes. I was scared to push my limits past what I was comfortable with, yet eventually, many months later, I finally attempted the rope. I did this because I had to reach another step in my climbing adventure, which I still have not gotten to do, due to the necessity of taking an expensive class. This would be lead climbing, a form of rope climbing with an added sense of adrenaline and fear. Compared to regular top rope climbing, where you're anchored at the top, Lead climbing requires you to clip in your support anchors as you go up. After hours and hours of bouldering, I figured I'd reached my limit and I wanted something new. This was when I first started to top rope climb. Thanks to my friend who works at the gym where I climb, I was able to get instructed within a 2-day process to be top rope certified. This involved me getting an hour or so lesson for 2 days in a row on how to tie in as the climber, how to clip in as the belayer, along with the actual process of belaying. In rock climbing, belaying is the safety technique when one person, who is the belayer, secures a climber using a rope and a belay device, allowing them to catch the climber if they fall, provide tension for rest, or lower them safely. I struggled mainly with learning how to tie the knot as the climber, along with remembering the terms and the names for everything. But after a couple of days or so, it's now just muscle memory. Becoming certified was the next step I needed to take to ensure my safety and knowledge before I could take a class on lead climbing, my true next goal. I was lucky enough to finally get to climb outside for my first ever time last week. Climbing outside has always been another goal of mine as well, and I was very excited to finally complete it. Climbing outside comes with more safety precautions, such as crash pads, spotting, weather, and helmets, along with the outdoor holds being generally more difficult and much less forgiving on your hands. I found that looking for what climbers call the beta, which is the intended way of climbing a route, is much more difficult to find when outdoors. You're climbing a rock, so the holds aren't marked with certain colors, like on a rock wall. You actually have to search for them. Luckily, since I was bouldering, a lot of them were marked with chalk from the previous people's attempts. Overall, I would say I had a blast climbing outdoors, especially compared to a climbing gym. There's much less noise, you're with your friends, you got some music on the speaker, and although it absolutely tore my hands to shreds, I definitely see myself climbing outdoors more in the future. I'd like to acknowledge my mentor, Stephanie, for helping me a lot with my bouldering techniques, improving my average bouldering grade by a full grade or two. She also introduced me to a new climbing gym I'd never been to, and a new culture behind climbing. Stephanie works for a hospital and runs climbing groups with people who have disabilities, along with running Asian culture nights and many other events that I got to experience. I got to accomplish many goals of strength training, climbing techniques, and mental and physical grit. Climbing is one of the most humbling sports or hobbies I have ever introduced myself to. It was very difficult to overcome at the beginning of this adventure. I got to make many friends along the way due to the climbing community being very accepting, outgoing, and joyful. Everyone in the climbing gym is always happy and in a good mood, and there are always people of all skill levels. It is very nice for me to be able to recognize that there's always someone better than me in the gym to receive advice from. Throughout this project, I learned just how complex and diverse the world of climbing is. When I first started, I only saw climbing as just bouldering and rope climbing, but I quickly realized that there are many techniques, training methods, and styles within the sport. For example, I never used kilter and tension boards before, but they became an essential part of improving my technique. Another thing that surprised me was how much climbing is mental, not just physical. Overcoming your fears and trusting yourself is just as important as having strength and endurance. Lastly, I gained a new appreciation for the climbing community and its culture. It's not just about getting stronger, but also about sharing knowledge and supporting each other's progress. This journey taught me a lot about my persistence and ability to push through fear. I used to be hesitant about trying new things in climbing, especially stepping into rope climbing after bouldering for so long. But through this experience, I learned that when I truly commit to something and trust the process, I can surpass my own perceived limits. I also learned that growth isn't always immediate. It took me months before I finally decided to try rope climbing, and even then, I'm still looking forward to taking another step before reaching my ultimate goal of lead climbing. The patience and resilience I developed through all my hard falls and all my successful climbs are skills I can carry into all areas of my life, such as my work and personal life and helping me navigate real-world problems thrown at me. There's one thing I want to leave with you all, is that climbing is more than just a sport. It's an experience that challenges both body and mind. It taught me discipline, problem solving, and how to overcome obstacles, both literal and mental. It also connects people, as I saw firsthand through the climbing community and my mentor, Stephanie. Whether you've ever thought about trying climbing or not, I encourage you to step outside of your comfort zone and whatever interests you. You never know what you're capable of until you push yourself to take that next step, just like I did with climbing. I appreciate all of you for listening to my raspy voice, and thank you very much.
Hello everyone, my name is Lila Inman, and for my senior project, I fostered 2 litters of kittens. Ever since I was a little kid, I have loved animals with my whole heart. My house has been a zoo for as long as I can remember. But the moment I knew I wanted to become a vet will always stick out in my mind. I was 5 years old and I went to a vet appointment with my mom, and one of the vet techs decided to take me into the back and show me around. It was like a behind the scenes. Since then, I have had the opportunity to shadow many a vet, but I will never forget the wonder and curiosity I found in that moment. This is my first opportunity to take initiative and agency with my educational experience. I worked with a program called Colorado Foster Feline Rescue, or CFFR for short. You'll hear me reference this later. In order to become a foster volunteer with them, I had to be interviewed. During this interview, I had to show them my intended space in which the kittens would be contained, which containing kittens is actually very hard. Once approved to become a foster volunteer, I had to be on standby, able to receive a litter of kittens at any moment. There was a lot of unknown at this time. I didn't know how many kittens would be in the litter, how old they were, what condition they would be in. It was a waiting game. Finally, at the beginning of May, I received my first litter. When kittens are fostered in a household of 1 or more capable adults, they receive better and more personalized care. When a kitten is under the age of 12 weeks, their life is a balancing act, and any small disturbance can be the difference between life and death. Every year, roughly 3.4 million cats are filtered through the animal shelters in America. About 1/3 of these cats are euthanized. Fostering was designed to help minimize those numbers. Not only does fostering help save the lives of kittens, but also helps socialize them in preparation for adoption. My family ended up adopting a kitten from the first litter, which added a fun, unexpected layer to my project. I was able to experience the first year of his life and compare the differences between my shelter cat's behavior and his own. Everyone that meets the cat we lovingly call our foster fail says he's one of the most friendly cats they've met. I credit this entirely because of fostering. As a foster parent, my day-to-day life became centered around these kittens. My first litter was in relatively good health, but I still had to keep track of their routine medications like dewormer. Additionally, I had to weigh each one of them daily and keep record of that as well. After their spaying and neutering, I gave them 2 rounds of pain medication and monitored their incision sites for about a week. However, my second litter was challenge after challenge. They were severely malnourished and lethargic when they were first placed in my care, making protocol that much more important. The first signs of danger popped up during the daily weight checks. Macaroni's weight had completely plateaued. No change at all in 3 days, despite seeing him eat multiple servings of wet and dry food throughout each day, meant something was very wrong. My suspicions were then solidified when 3 days later, I go to pick him up off the bathroom floor, and he peed everywhere. Pink. His pee was pink. This was really not good. I remember going through all 7 stages of grief in that moment. Pink meant blood. Blood in urine is bad no matter how old an animal is, but this was specifically terrible. At this point, he was only 1.4 pounds. His body didn't have the necessary tools to fight any type of infection. He was then urgently sent to the vet where they discovered a bladder infection, sinus infection, and pneumonia. At this point, my mentor and I decided it would be best to move him to a long-term foster who was more equipped to handle intense medical complications such as these. I then spent the rest of the week monitoring the other 2 kittens to ensure that the infection had not spread to them as well. Wishful thinking. 2 days later, they began coughing. And no, kittens don't cough, or at least they shouldn't. This meant that I unfortunately missed out on the adoption process of these kittens because they were moved to a long-term foster as well. The entire objective of fostering a litter of kittens is preparing them for adoption by helping them meet certain criteria. Before a kitten can be adopted, they must meet a weight requirement, specifically 2 pounds. Once they hit this weight marker, they are eligible for spaying and neutering, which is mandatory for all kittens, a part of the CFFR program. I learned that the intention behind this is to restrict unethical breeding and overpopulation of feral cats. During their healing process, they were typically slower and less energetic. I would spend this rare moment of downtime to write short paragraphs describing each kitten individually. What were they like? Cuddly? Energetic? Avid climber? This helped potential adopters get a feel for what the kitten needed and what dynamic they would bring to their home. Next, I needed to attach these mini bios to a series of images. Do you know how hard it is to take pictures of 1-pound black kittens? It's impossible. After 3 days of trying to get these images of black little blurs running around the house, it was time to place them into adoption. It was time to interview the prospective adopters through Zoom. They would take this time to see the kitten in more detail and answer my list of questions. Would you ever declaw your cat? Would you let your cat outdoors? A yes to either of these was an automatic no on their application. As much as I would love to tell you about each individual interview, I can't, because I simply don't remember them. The minimum age to adopt a cat through CFFR is 24, which meant all of those people had way more life experience than me, and I felt as though I didn't know what I was doing. After these interviews were completed and the adoption process was approved, it was time to say goodbye. I knew how hard this would be, and ahead of time, but watching these cats I spent hours upon hours caring for leave, not knowing their future health, it was gut-wrenching, but rewarding. Many of these animals filtering through the shelter system face a biological disadvantage. Pets born with black fur are 33% more likely to be abandoned or neglected in some form. The 2 litters that were in my care in the duration of my project all had black coats. I experienced the discrimination of these pets firsthand. Both litters were posted for adoption for a much longer period than what is considered normal. Black cats specifically have a reputation for bringing bad luck to a household, largely due to their association with Halloween or witchcraft. The 2 litters of kittens I was able to foster in the last year were drastically different in many ways, from the kittens and the needs themselves, to my own schedule and capabilities fluctuating throughout the year. The first litter I fostered was during May through July, meaning even with a summer job, I was able to give the kittens all of my attention and time. You know the joke parents tell about their first kid being so easy it makes them want another? That's exactly what happened to me with this project. Second litter was so hard. Now, I'm not sure if it was just me, but I'm sure many of my peers remember and understand how stressful those months were with college applications taking priority over all of our lives. Not only was my life outside of the kittens stressful and packed full to the brim, but also the kittens themselves were in a much worse spot, as I discussed earlier, with their many health problems. Throughout the project, I had encountered many unexpected roadblocks. Something I struggled with consistently throughout was my age and credibility. Not only was this my first time ever fostering, but I was also the youngest foster volunteer in the program. During the prospective adoption interviews, I often found myself questioning my knowledge and authority. The potential adopters were typically in their 20s, in the process of settling down, working big kid jobs, and I was scared of them. There weren't really steps to take in order to prevent nerves. It taught me that no matter how much preparation you do, in the end, you have to trust yourself and what you're capable of. At the end of the day, I had spent over 60 hours with each litter. No one knew these cats better than I did. My age had no impact on that fact. Something I wasn't expecting was the aspects of my life that improved during this project. For my entire academic career, I have struggled with time management and accountability. But now, there were several sets of small paws that relied on my timeliness and attention to detail for their survival. Another unexpected setback I faced was the disconnect between me and my mentor, Carrie. During my second litter, we would often have moments where there was a breakdown in communication, because I was unable to respond to texts immediately because of the classes during the daytime. This was a shift from my previous summer carefree schedule. I learned how to have a professional conversation and come to a mutual agreement in a less stressful manner, whereas I may have classified these discussions as fights prior to my fostering experience. Not everyone I encounter will agree with me 100% of the time. And, in fact, I believe the opposite now. Disagreement is a part of life. Now I feel more equipped to handle it. This project was very meaningful to me. Not only did I learn so much from it, but it also felt like the perfect transition into the next steps in my education. I am proud to announce that I will be attending CSU in the fall of this year pursuing a career in veterinary medicine. Although exhausting, I am incredibly thankful for this experience and how hands-on it allowed me to become in the exploration for my love of animals. I would also like to thank my parents for the sacrifice of their basement and how much space this took up and how often they would get out, which was really challenging. Thank you all so much for listening to me and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Hello. If you don't already know, my name is Oscar Perlman, and my senior project is called the American Garden. Now, if you haven't met me, this is basically all you need to know. I started reading the New York Times in 7th grade. I've seen The West Wing too many times to count, and in keeping with my grandma's tradition, I watched the musical 1776 every single 4th of July. Among these many political aspects, I thought they made me perfectly qualified to work in politics. And there were a few things I wanted more. Then, last summer, my wish actually came true. The pieces had fallen into place, and me and 1,000 other college and high school students were selected to be part of a political organizing program called Democracy Summer, run by the one and only Jamie Raskin from Maryland. This program was awesome. I got to hear from all kinds of people who worked in politics that I'd always admired, and in my first week, I even got to join an actual congressional campaign in Colorado. Everything I had ever wanted from politics meant that I wanted to make the biggest difference possible. I truly believed that if I finally got off my phone and started participating in the system, I would actually have the power to change it. So I decided to join the Dira Carabella's re-election campaign. Dr. Carabella was a Democratic incumbent in Colorado's most competitive congressional district, the 8th, which stretches from North Glen to Greeley. In 2022, she only won by 1,600 votes, which is not that much more than the people standing and sitting in this room. And this past election, it was the 6th closest of 438 House races across the country. Needless to say, I knew this was the campaign that needed me. Now, I expected to join the campaign in the war room, learning about political strategy and fundraising and whatever fun, totally unrealistic ways I had romanticized politics, especially scooting around the office on a rolling chair, shouting out polling numbers. Instead, I was an enforcer at the bottom of the food chain. I learned quickly that the main thing campaigns do is actually outreach. At the end of the day, you're trying to win. And to win, you need to convince people that your candidate is the right candidate. You have roughly 6 months, usually, to make sure as many of those people as is humanly possible turn out and vote on election day. Across my 6 months on the campaign, I visited almost 2,000 houses, and our campaign visited over 100,000. We worked practically day and night. Meanwhile, we were up against impossibly powerful political forces in one of the craziest election years of the century. Needless to say, it was a hell of an introduction. My main job, for those who don't know, is canvassing. It is the primary tool of a political campaign when conducting outreach. For me, it meant spending every weekend and every single school break out knocking on doors. Now, I remember my first day canvassing. It was quite the adventure. I was sent out to what for me felt like the ends of the earth. It was this cute little cookie cutter suburb in Commerce City. I was out under the summer sun, there to knock doors as always, and I remember that first door I knocked. I was so excited to speak with normal people about politics, but it was clear immediately that the people were not as passionate as I was. The man opened the door. I said, "Hello, my name is Oscar, and I'm a volunteer with you, Dear Caravan for Congress. How are you?" And he closed it immediately. Looking back, I wouldn't have answered the door for me either. A kid practically with a political button, this one, an on-theme campaign t-shirt, and a satchel full of hundreds of campaign flyers. Then I walked down the street and I saw a man mowing his lawn. I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be easy. He's already outside of the house. Hello, my name is Oscar. I'm with the Dear Caravan for Congress. How are you? But he turned me away too. After around 50 doors, I was a little exhausted, frustrated, and pretty demoralized. But on my last door, I was looking for a woman and her husband answered instead. I started freaking out when he spoke back to me in Spanish. My Spanish was missing the proper political vocabulary for this interaction, and I was pretty nervous. But we had an interesting conversation, He was patient, and what I remember most was near the end, he said, "Muy joven, you're so young." Of all the impossibly astonishing things concerning our country today, the most surprising thing to the old man standing in front of me was that a young person was actually interested in politics. For the remaining 6 months of canvassing, almost every day was like this. I found rejection and heartbreak, but in equal measure I met some truly wonderful people who taught me more about life than I could have ever imagined. I met a truck driving couple who only spoke Bulgarian. I had to use Google Translate. I met Haitian and Venezuelan immigrants just trying to get by. I met a son who was worried that his father was going to be kicked off Medicaid. It was those sorts of conversations that altered my perspective on practically everything. I wish you could meet them. And when I wasn't out knocking doors, which was much of the time, I was working back in the office with some of the most talented, passionate, and hardworking people I have ever met. I got to speak with the House Minority Leader and Colorado's 2 senators. I met my own Congresswoman, Diana DeGette. I marched in a 4th of July parade. I sat in the audience of our candidates' congressional debate. I even got to help people vote at a polling place. Needless to say, all my dreams had come true. By the time the election was over, I had lived the most fruitful and life-changing months of my life. But looking back, I know a couple of things to be true. I entered this system believing that I alone had the power to change it. All of those expectations were upended completely. A week after we lost the presidential election, Yadira Karavea's campaign staff awoke to find that we had lost our congressional race, too. The political system I had dreamed of working in turned out to be far more cutthroat and far less romantic than I believed it to be. But I also learned that politics, and moreover democracy, is only as meaningful as the people who choose to participate in it. And after speaking with hundreds of voters, it is abundantly clear that our democracy doesn't survive unless you, all of you, choose to embody it. Politics is, at the end of the day, a part of life that affects each and every one of us. So, as part of this experience, I re-interviewed my former lovely coworkers to conduct a sort of post-mortem in the form of a podcast. In doing so, I think it brought not just me, but my colleagues, and will hopefully bring some of you a sense of catharsis and clarity after this crazy election season. You can listen to it with the QR code at the end of this presentation. But if you can't, there's one thing you need to understand about political systems. It is the following overlooked discovery and its harrowing truth. Democracy was never about the number of doors I knocked. It was about finding the meaning in the people who answered the door. I thought this political work was about me. No. That assumption goes against everything in politics. At the end of the day, democracy is about one thing. You. Thank you.